Chapter 310. Xianglu, a nine-headed snake? I had never heard of this name before, but I had heard of a nine-headed snake. In my memory, it was a creature from Western mythology. I didn't know that it existed in real life. However, according to Yin Nantian, if this thing was a living creature, it had lived for several thousand years since the Shang dynasty. Ordinary animals didn't have that long of a lifespan. It must be a monster that cultivated. I asked Yin Nantian, this thing has lived for several thousand years, and it has always stayed by the Tai Sui tree and the true dragon vein. I'm afraid its cultivation base isn't low. There was something I didn't tell him. The liquid in the nine-headed snake's body contained the saliva of the true dragon. If the spirit snake swallowed that liquid, it could turn into a dragon. This Xianglu must be very powerful. Yin Nantian shook his head. This Xianglu doesn't have a lifespan of several thousand years. It should be around 1,000 years old. As an ancient beast, it should have some cultivation base. However, this little thing doesn't have any power. Moreover, it's very timid. We don't need to worry about it attacking people. I was puzzled. Professor Liang, Yin Nantian, had said that this place was a sacrificial culture of the Shang dynasty. The Xianglu had used the terracotta statues to create the saliva of the true dragon vein. How could it be only 1,000 years old? According to historical records, the Shang dynasty had been around for 3,000 to 4,000 years. After I asked him, Yin Nantian smiled and said mysteriously, it's a sacrificial culture of the Shang dynasty. The Tai Sui tree and the true dragon vein were mostly created by the Shang dynasty. However, this place isn't necessarily the work of the people of the Shang dynasty. It's not the work of the Shang dynasty? While I was thinking about what he meant, Yin Nantian didn't want to talk about it. He changed the topic and asked Chen Yangting to feed the unknown mushrooms to the mice. Chen Yangting did as he was told. Speaking of which, it was strange. Yin Nantian didn't know what method he used, but those bright red mice that had obviously not been weaned on milk stretched out their noses and sniffed the fungi. It was as if they had smelled milk. They climbed up and quickly devoured the fungi. Although the mushrooms were not big, the newborn mice were only the size of a thumb. After eating the mushrooms, the 5 mice's bellies bulged as if they were about to explode. On their transparent skin, blood vessels protruded one by one, looking disgusting and strange. After finishing this task, Yin Nantian did not stop there. He took out another 5 obsidian stones with different attributes and placed them in front of the little mouse's mouth. Just now, the little mice eating those fungi was already shocking enough. Now, after these little mice smelled the obsidian, they were still unable to endure it. They didn't care that their stomachs were about to explode and opened their mouths to bite the obsidian. Obsidian was a meteorite from outer space. It had been tempered by the friction of the atmosphere, so its hardness could be imagined. However, the strange thing was that the mouths of these little mice that had not grown teeth could actually bite it. Like eating a cake, he ate the obsidian into his mouth bit by bit. As a result, the little mouse's perfectly round belly swelled up even more. It was to the extent that its belly was propped up on the ground, and its 4 legs were lifted into the air, unable to touch the ground. Even so, they were still greedily devouring the obsidian until they had eaten all the big obsidian stones. After eating, the 5 little mice turned into 5 round balls, lying there motionlessly. They didn't open their eyes, and I couldn't see if they were in pain or not. Yin Nantian picked up each mouse. After checking them carefully, he nodded in satisfaction. Then he carefully placed the 5 mice on the thick tube jutting out of the mountain wall, next to Xianglu's body. They didn't touch Xianglu's body directly, just a few centimeters away. After everything was done, Yin Nantian sat cross-legged on the ground. He gestured for us to sit down as well. Now, we just need to sit here and wait. I didn't know what he was planning. As I was about to ask, Chen Yangting spoke first. Master, what's the use of these mice? Can they lure Xianglu's entire body out? This thick tube looks like Xianglu's mouth. But you said that Xianglu is a 9-headed snake. Do we have to deal with the other 8 heads one by one? Yin Nantian looked like a good teacher. When he heard my question, he carefully explained, 9 is the extreme number. Xianglu is a 9-headed snake, but it doesn't mean that he has 9 heads. It just means that he has a lot of heads. In this cave, the terracotta statues on both sides of the wall have Xiang Lu's head. This soft tube should be Xiang Lu's tail, and the hole on it is his excretory outlet. His explanation was beyond our expectation. On the way here, we had seen thousands of terracotta statues on both sides of the wall. It seemed that Xiang Lu wasn't a 9-headed snake, but a 10-headed snake. What puzzled me more was the thick tube's tail. According to him, Xiang Lu had used his mouth to absorb the spirit energy from the corpses inside the terracotta statues and excreted true dragon saliva. I turned to look at the half-gaseous, half-liquid mass of true dragon saliva not far from us. I suddenly felt a little nauseous. Qin Yanting was like a curious baby. He bowed his head and pondered for a while. Then he asked, "Teacher, why did you put those mice on Xiang Lu's tail? If you want to lure it to eat, you should put them near your mouth, right?" Yin Nantian stroked his beard and smiled. "It's a long story. Xiang Lu is somewhat similar to my yang spirit. On the surface, its body is huge and stretches across the entire cave. The ancient book even says that it eats the 9 earths, that is, it can swallow the 9 mountains. But in fact, Xiang Lu's body is just an inch-long snake. Its huge appearance is just its skin or its shell. When Xiang Lu's body grows an inch, its shell can grow 10,000 meters. It's really mysterious. Moreover, Xiang Lu is timid. Its body hides in its shell, and no one can find it. Even if we dig out its shell and bring it back, its body can run away if we're not careful. After it runs away, the inch-long Xiang Lu can regrow a 10,000-meter-long shell in just a blink of an eye. That's why it's hard to catch it. No wonder Yin Nantian kept saying Xiang Lu, this little thing. I thought he was just casually calling it that. I didn't expect that this Xiang Lu, which looked so huge, was actually a little thing. After explaining the strangeness of Xiang Lu, Yin Nantian told me the reason why he had set up the bait. As for the reason why I put these mice on its tail, it's because the tail is the farthest from its head. Xiang Lu's speed is so fast that naked eyes can't see it. Even the heavenly master can't detect it. However, Xiang Lu lives in the head, and it only eats in the head. I used a secret technique to paralyze Xiang Lu for a while. But this little thing is an ancient species. I'm not sure how long the bait can paralyze it. That's why I have to buy more time in other places. The further the bait is, the longer it will take it to eat. It'll be easier for us to catch it. After explaining for a long time, Yin Nantian didn't show his impatience. His temper and patience were excellent. If I didn't know his real face, it would be hard to see through his disguise. At this moment, Qin Yanting looked at Yin Nantian with admiration. He hadn't called Yin Nantian master because he didn't want to be shameless, but because he was sincere. Of course, if it wasn't like that, he wouldn't have deceived me in the Yin Corpse sect, and I wouldn't have sincerely called him Big Brother Yin. After Yin Nantian explained the reason, the 3 of us didn't say anything. We looked at the 5 mice and quietly waited for Xiang Lu to take action. After around 30 minutes, the mice didn't move, and neither did Yin Nantian. The spirit snake on my body suddenly became restless. It anxiously transmitted its voice to me. "Kid, that thing is coming. Hurry up and leave this place." I was surprised and looked at Yin Nantian. He didn't notice my situation. I slightly lowered my head and asked the spirit snake, "You mean Xiang Lu? Why do you want to leave this place?" "Yes, it's Xiang Lu. That thing is very ferocious. In ancient times, it could even swallow a dragon. It's really scary. Hurry and take me away from here." When I heard the spirit snake's words, I was a little scared. However, after listening to him, I understood. Xiang Lu was a creature that could restrain dragons. Although the spirit snake wasn't a dragon, it was still a dragon. When it felt Xiang Lu's aura, it was scared out of its wits. As for what he said about Xiang Lu being ferocious, it was nonsense. Yin Nantian cherishes life a lot. To escape, he had used his yang spirit to linger at death's door for more than 10 years. If Xiang Lu was really dangerous, he wouldn't risk his life. That's why I didn't move. I opened my mouth to comfort the spirit snake. However, before I could say anything, Yin Nantian's voice came. He only said one word, "Go." Chapter 311. Yin Nanshan's speed was extremely fast. By the time his voice was heard, he had already jumped off the platform and was heading towards the outside of the cave. Qin Yangting also hastily climbed down the mountain. Although I didn't have much intention to help, I was interested in the Xianglu. Thus, I followed behind Qin Yangting. When we reached the outside of the cave, Yin Nantian didn't go far. He stood there and looked down at the golden ropes hanging from the terracotta figures. When he saw us come out, he said, "The Xianglu needs a few minutes to eat. You two stay here. After 5 minutes, you will start to check the golden ropes from here. I will start from the other end of the cave. If you see the ropes turn red, immediately shout. Do you understand?" Qin Yangting nodded. "I understand, master." Yin Nantian nodded in satisfaction. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly stopped. He pointed at me and said to Qin Yangting, "Be careful. Keep an eye on that kid. Don't let him play any tricks." After Qin Yangting nodded, Yin Nanshan's body flashed and disappeared from the other end of the cave. After Yin Nantian left, Qin Yangting and I remained silent. After about 5 minutes, when I was about to leave, Qin Yangting suddenly called out to me, "Brother Zhou." I was stunned by the way he addressed me. I turned to look at him, feeling a little playful. I smiled and said, "I don't deserve to be called brother by Chun Daozhong. What's wrong? Does Chun Daozhong have something to say?" Qin Yangting lifted his head to look at the other end of the cave. As he walked forward, he lowered his voice and said, "Brother Zhou, we've been fighting for our lives. I know that you have a conflict with me. That's normal. But now, we're both under the control of this old thing. We have to work together to escape." His words confused me. I stopped and looked at him vigilantly. This fellow had just called me master, and now he wanted to discuss how to deal with Yin Nantian? Was he being sincere, or was he trying to trick me? I maintained my vigilance as I slowly walked forward. I asked, "The one in danger should be me." Yin Nantian said that he wanted to take you as his disciple. Becoming the disciple of a heavenly teacher isn't a disgrace to you. Why are you being controlled by him? When Qin Yangting heard what I said, he proudly raised his head and said in a clear voice, "I am the disciple of Celestial Master Zhang of Mount Longhu. It's true that this old thing is a celestial master, but even 10 celestial masters can't compare to Celestial Master Zhang. If I sincerely worship him as my master, wouldn't I be abandoning the light for the dark?" I had no choice but to address him as master. "Brother Zhou, don't underestimate the pride of the people of Mount Longhu." At this moment, I finally believed Qin Yangting's words. I couldn't help but look at him in a new light. This fellow had targeted me time and time again, so we had a deep grudge against each other. However, these were two different things. His words of loyalty to his teacher sounded very responsible. It was laughable that Yin Nantian was such a cunning old thing. He had been hunting geese all day, but had been pecked blind by geese. He had actually been tricked by Qin Yangting. My expression didn't change. I lowered my head to check the ropes on the terracotta figures as I asked him, "Chun Daozhong is telling me to cooperate with you. But if we really escape, won't you still want to deal with me because I'm a remnant of the witch race? My cultivation isn't as good as yours. If I escape from Yin Nanshan's tiger's den, won't I have to enter your wolf's den?" Qin Yangting hastily shook his head. "Brother Zhou, don't worry. Times have changed. If we really escape, I'll let you go and won't attack you. Even if we meet again in the future, as long as there are no outsiders present, I won't attack you. What do you think?" His words were extremely sincere. Since he could trick Yin Nantian, it wouldn't be a problem for him to trick me. I really found it hard to believe him. In reality, if I didn't have any other choice, I wouldn't have any other choice but to cooperate with him, regardless of whether I believed him or not. However, I had already thought of using Xiao Jin's transformation to deal with Yin Nantian, so there was no need for me to take the risk. Thus, I shook my head and said to Qin Yangting, "Of course I'm willing to agree to your conditions. However, you have to know that Yin Nantian is a celestial master. You and I only have glorious consciousness cultivation. Why do you think Yin Nantian would leave the two of us here while he went ahead to check on the situation? It's not because he trusts you, but because in front of absolute power, tricks are useless. Yin Nantian doesn't care at all. Moreover, it's fine if I escape, but even if you escape, there's still Yin Nanshan's pill in your body. How are you going to neutralize it? Even though I said it perfunctorily, Chen Yanting replied seriously, you don't have to worry about that. My Dragon Tiger Mountain has a tradition of 2,000 years. How can a small celestial master be compared to it? As long as we escape, Celestial Master Zhang will naturally cure me of the poison. As for what you said, I understand. However, we don't have any other choice. Once this matter is settled and we're brought out of this cave, I'm afraid we won't have another chance to escape. I couldn't help but admit that his analysis was reasonable. It was a pity that I only had to be responsible for my own life. His life and death had nothing to do with me. I grinned. There will always be a chance. Since Yin Nantian left the two of us here, he must be on guard. This isn't a good chance to escape. Shen Daozhong, please don't be impatient. After saying that, I ignored him and continued to check on the ropes on the terracotta figurines. Shen Yanting's face was filled with constipation. He stood on the spot and stared at me for a long time. Then, he gloomily followed me. He didn't try to persuade me anymore, but just lowered his head and looked around. I laughed coldly in my heart. When this fellow injured Tong Tong to kill me, he didn't hesitate at all. Now that he was in trouble, he knew to come and try to cooperate with me. He even promised me an empty promise. He didn't even mention making a Dao hard oath. How laughable. The two of us didn't talk anymore. We walked along the mountain wall and silently searched for more than 100 meters. Then I saw a blood-red rope not far from us. I walked forward and lowered my head to check. Then I called Chen Yanting and pointed at the rope. I found it. Call your master here. Chen Yanting glared at me, and his ruthless expression became thicker. After a while of silence, he lowered his head and put away his ruthless expression. When he lifted his head, he squeezed out a smile and shouted at the end of the cave, Master, we found it. After shouting several times, a white shadow quickly appeared. Yin Nantian didn't open his mouth to ask. He just lowered his head and scanned the surroundings. Then he saw the blood-red rope. He rushed to the terracotta figurines and carefully pulled the rope up to check. Then he said to me, take out your sword. When I pulled the figurines out, quickly cut off Xiang Lu's head. Do you understand? I nodded and took out my magic sword. I was ready. Yin Nantian placed his hands on the terracotta figurines. However, he suddenly stopped. After thinking for a while, he called Chen Yanting over and asked me to give him the sword. I grinned. This old man still didn't trust me. Unfortunately, he didn't know that I was much more loyal than Chen Yanting. However, I didn't explain and just gave the sword to Chen Yanting. Then, I hid in the corner and watched the show. Yin Nantian didn't worry anymore. He grabbed the terracotta figurines and pulled it off the wall. When the bottom of the terracotta figurines was pulled out, Chen Yanting held the sword with both hands. A cold light flashed. Without any hesitation, he directly cut off a section of the soft tube. Yin Nantian moved faster. Right when Chen Yanting's sword slashed, he took out a black cloth bag and put it on the broken part of the soft tube. Then he pinched the tube through the bag and pulled it out of the terracotta figurines. I didn't even have time to see Xiang Lu's head before Yin Nantian stuffed it into the bag. On the ground next to the bag was the remains of a mouse. It was obvious that Xiang Lu's body hadn't finished eating yet. After finishing the job, Yin Nantian stood up in satisfaction. Looking at the black bag in his hand, he couldn't help but laugh. After laughing, he turned around and patted Chen Yanting's shoulder a few times. He praised loudly, well done. This Xiang Lu is a treasure. I won't forget you when I get the benefits. After this matter is over, I'll help you improve further and break through to the Celestial Master Realm after we get out. Chen Yanting's face beamed. I didn't know if it was true or not. All right. After making his promise to Chen Yanting, Yin Nantian put the bag on his body. Then he took us out of the cave. I guessed Yin Nantian was in a good mood because he had successfully captured Xiang Lu. On the way, he pointed at the terracotta figurines and said to me, Kid, didn't you ask why Xiang Lu is only 1,000 years old? It's not a difficult question. Lower your head and look at these terracotta figurines. Do you see anything? Terracotta figurines? I had looked at these terracotta figurines many times. Was there something I didn't see? I didn't ask. After looking at them for a long time, I answered, I didn't see anything. Besides some simple lines, there's nothing else. Haha, the problem lies in those simple lines. Yin Nantian shook his head and said, although the Shang dynasty belonged to the antiquity time, it had already given birth to an ancient civilization. The sacrificial ceremony was the most important thing in the country. From the emperor to the common people, everyone had to participate. The sacrificial ceremony was very luxurious and exquisite. Look at the inside of the cave. No matter if it's the sacrificial altar outside or the terracotta figurines in the cave, everything is extremely simple. It has nothing to do with luxury or exquisite, especially these terracotta figurines. They can't even be compared to the ancient porcelain excavated from archaeology. How could the sacrificial ceremony of the Shang dynasty be so simple? I was surprised. I hadn't thought about this before. Yin Nantian didn't wait for me to think more and said, moreover, there's another big problem. Where are we? Shenzhen, I answered subconsciously. Yes, Shenzhen. During the Shang dynasty, other than the land of Bashu, which had other civilizations after Lingnan, it was a barren land. Why would anyone travel thousands of miles, cut through brambles and thorns to come to Shenzhen, and specially build such a simple and crude place of worship? When I was in university, I studied ancient Chinese, so I was familiar with history. Yin Nantian was right. During the Shang dynasty, although Guangdong wasn't a barren land, it was thousands of miles away from the Central Plains. There were no interactions between the two. The power of the Central Plains also couldn't reach here. Even if there was a sacrificial ceremony, it could only have been done by the local tribes. It was impossible to have a sacrificial ceremony for the mystic bird. Moreover, this cave was extremely large. With the power of the small tribes, it was impossible for them to build such a huge project. I couldn't help but be curious and asked, how did this cave come about? Was it built 1,000 years ago? Yin Nantian nodded. That's right. This place was built according to the sacrificial ceremony of the Shang dynasty. Moreover, you must have heard of the person who built it. At that time, the foreign tribes invaded the Central Plains, burning, killing, and pillaging. They borrowed the power of the Northern Dragon Vein to destroy the Middle Dragon Vein and seize the fate of the Han people. This person used his power to lead the Han people to resist. At the same time, he found the Tai Sui and imitated the ancient ritual of the Shang dynasty. He used the Tai Sui to stabilize the fate of the country and the true Dragon Vein to revive the Southern Dragon Vein. He built this sacrificial ceremony here in an attempt to save the country from collapse. Unfortunately, he failed at the last step. He couldn't wait for the Tai Sui to be completely transformed. Chapter 312. When I thought of Wen Tianxiang, the first thing that popped into my head was Mount Wen's lineage. When Zhang Camwen had told me about Mount Wen's lineage, I had thought that it was far-fetched. After all, it was common for people to find a famous ancestor for themselves. However, if what Yin Nantian had said was true, then Wen Tianxiang really was a feng shui master. In his later years, he had often been active in the Guangdong area. It made sense that he had left a lineage. However, using the Tai Sui to stabilize the fate of the country and using the ancient ritual of the Shang dynasty to revitalize the Dragon's Vein was too unimaginable. During the declining era of the Han dynasty, one person had used the ancient ritual to find the Tai Sui and revitalize the entire Dragon's Vein. It was unbelievable. The Dragon's Vein started from the Kunlun Mountains, and there were 3 in China. The Northern Dragon went down the Yellow River, through Qinghai and Gansu, to Mongolia's Beijing, and then the 3 provinces in the northeast to Korea. The Middle Dragon went down the Yangtze River and the Yellow River, through Sichuan, Shaanxi, Hunan, Anhui, and finally Shandong. It stopped at Zhongyue and then merged into the Bohai Sea. The Southern Dragon went down Yunnan and Guizhou, through Guangdong and Guangxi, along the coast of the southeast, Fujian, Zhejiang, and Jiangsu. The Dragon's Vein was said to be a small grave, and a big one to stabilize the country. In history, The rise and fall of dynasties and the change of imperial power were all related to the dragon's vein. Since ancient times, the middle dragon had been the leader of China. Civilization had started in Hulao, and the royal power was in Xi'an and Luoyang. These two places were on the middle dragon's nodes, and that was the era when the Chinese civilization was at its peak. As time passed, all things had their ups and downs. The middle dragon disappeared, and the northern dragon flourished. As time went by, it was the end of the Song dynasty. The Liao dynasty and the Jin dynasty replaced each other. The Yelu and Wanyan clans dominated the world. In the end, under the iron hooves of the Mongols, the entire Eurasian continent fell. The Han dynasty, the favored child of creation, had been living in the world for thousands of years. At this moment, it finally ended its rule over the world. From then on, although there were commoners who rose from the right of the Huai River and borrowed the power of the southern dragon to reclaim the throne, the stars changed, and the power of the northern dragon could not be stopped. 300 years later, they finally made a comeback. Compared to that, what was even more difficult to say was that the Western dragon calendar had been accumulating for thousands of years. When the Central Plains fell into the flames of war, the dragon Qi gushed out and the Great Voyage era began. Their footprints gradually spread all over the world, and their rule followed. Following that, the dispute over royal authority in the Central Plains had nothing to do with the general trend of the world. The center of power shifted to the west, and a new era finally arrived. Moreover, 1,000 years ago, the Southern Song dynasty was content with a corner of its territory. The Minister of Literature supported it independently, and the military and government were powerless. In the end, they could only try to change the world and use the dragon vein to determine the ownership of the tripod. What happened in that era was impossible to verify at this time. However, after a simple analysis, he understood what was going on. The city of Lin, and in the Southern Song dynasty, was today's Hangzhou, located at the node of the Southern Dragon's tail. If one wanted to prosper the Southern Dragon, one had to find the place where the dragon would prosper, and Guangdong and Guangxi were the keys. With my current cultivation, I could not see the specific location. However, from the actions of the Minister of Literature, there was no doubt that the place where the Southern Dragon would prosper was in Shenzhen. Perhaps the power of heaven could not be disobeyed, and the reason for the Minister of Literature's failure could not be verified. However, as a Han, in retrospect, this feng shui master who tried to save the fate of the Han people and the fate of China could be called the backbone of the Han people. Thinking about it, who would not be in tears? On the day of the Cliff Mountain, on the Yinzhou Lake, beside the Cliff Gate, Lu Xiufu carried the Emperor of Song into the sea. 200,000 Han people could not resist and jumped into the sea with their last faith. Among the three heroes at the end of the Song dynasty, only when Tianxiang was captured on the Mongolian warship. He witnessed this scene, but did not go to the netherworld with them. Instead, he survived and went north to Yinjing for 3 years. Outsiders could not understand the hardships he had gone through. Thinking about it now, he must have held a glimmer of hope and waited for the arrival of the Tai Sui. Unfortunately, history only left him with a long sigh. While thinking about these things, I kept silent. Then, I remembered Zhang Canwen and his brother. Wen Fei had passed away, and Zhang Canwen was the only one left in Wen Shan's bloodline. I wonder how he was doing. According to the legends, on the day of the Cliff Mountain, the Minister of Literature's bloodline had all died. Wen Shan's bloodline was the only one without a bloodline. If something happened to Zhang Canwen, his bloodline would be cut off forever. With this thought in mind, I had to protect Zhang Canwen if I had the power. While I was deep in thought, we had left the cave and arrived at the big cave where we had first arrived. I didn't know why, but Deputy Chief Zhang and the others who had stayed here were gone. The lighting equipment was still there, brightly illuminating the cave walls. I looked around. This place used to be a cave, and it had been renovated just like the terracotta statues. At that time, the Minister of Literature didn't have the time or manpower to make exquisite items. That was why the cave walls were rough and unadorned, and all the rocks were exposed. It wasn't strange at first, but in this environment, the square altar we had arrived at looked strange. The reason was that the altar was too exquisite. The altar was 10 meters long and 10 meters wide. It was made of quartz stones, which were rare. Moreover, these stones were piled together, and there were no gaps between them that the naked eye could see. It was really exquisite. In addition, the round well on the altar was even more exquisite. It was impossible to tell what material it was made of, but it gave off a faint fluorescence in the night. Moreover, it was not made of stone at all, but was carved out of a single boulder. Compared to the rough and unadorned surroundings, this altar was really eye-catching. Along the way, I couldn't help but stare at the altar. When we reached the round well, I scooped some water from the well and sniffed it. The water was clear and had a faint fragrance. I hesitated for a while, but I didn't dare to take a sip. The water was clear, which proved that this water was flowing. There must be a deep well that connected to the water underground. This made me even more suspicious. In ancient times, it wasn't easy to dig a well, especially a well that went deep underground. No matter if it was a drought or a flood, the water in this well would never run dry. It was really precious. Even with enough manpower, it would take several months to dig a well like this. Why did the Minister of Literature have to dig such a deep well? I had so many questions in my head, but I couldn't figure out the reason. At this moment, Yin Nantian was standing by the well. However, he didn't go up first. He asked Chen Yangting to go up first, with me in the middle and him at the back. This old man was really careful. To prevent any accidents, he had even thought about the order in which we should go up. Chen Yangting's eyes brightened. He thought that if he went up first, he might be able to escape. However, his eyes only brightened for a second. If he went up first, unless Celestial Master Zhang was waiting outside the well, he wouldn't be able to run far. Yin Nantian could easily catch him. At that time, he wouldn't be able to be his disciple anymore. Chen Yangting obediently grabbed the rope and climbed up. I didn't think much about it and followed behind him. We climbed up together. After the two of us had climbed up, Yin Nantian stood at the mouth of the well. However, he didn't hurry to get up. He just stood there with his head lowered, his eyes gazing at the water under his feet. I didn't know what he was thinking. When we were halfway up, I lowered my head to take a look. Yin Nantian finally lifted his head and prepared to come up. However, just as he was about to jump up, his face changed. He roared, and his translucent sun god body suddenly exploded with a bloody light. His body instantly turned into a red line and shot up from the bottom of the hole. In just a second, he had arrived next to Chen Yangting and me. He grabbed us from both sides and pulled us out of the hole without saying a word. After getting out of the bloody hole, Yin Nantian didn't slow down. His feet didn't touch the ground as he directly rushed out of the cellar and into the orchard. After reaching the ground, Yin Nantian seemed to have gone crazy. He continued to run with us, but he didn't leave horizontally. Instead, he flew vertically into the sky. He brought us dozens of meters in the air before he suddenly steadied his body. Even with Chen Yangting and my glory of consciousness cultivation, we were still in a difficult situation. After leaving the ground, we felt even more uncomfortable. Chen Yangting caught his breath. Just as he was about to ask, Yin Nantian suddenly raised his hand and interrupted him. His blood-stained head hung low, and his bloodshot eyes stared at the situation below. Instinctively, I followed his line of sight. Right at this moment, a dark shadow appeared at the entrance of the cellar dozens of meters below us. That shadow wasn't like Yin Nanshan's Yang spirit shadow, and it was also different from Tong Tong's Yin spirit physique. Instead, it looked like the old principal's corpse that had been reconstructed with some bloody flesh on its body. The withered and small body was wrapped in shadow, as though it was wearing a black robe. Its body was bent, and its head looked similar to a skeleton, except for a layer of waxy yellow flesh. However, what was different from a skeleton was that this shadow didn't have a skull. Where the skull used to be, there was a huge depression, and there was nothing inside. The slender head only supported an inverted triangular face. After leaving the entrance of the cellar, the shadow just stood there and didn't chase after us. It just lifted its head to look at us. because it didn't have a skull or a brain. Its eyes were at the top of its head. What was strange was that on the skull, there was a pair of complete eyes. Those two eyes were huge, without any blood vessels or blemishes. They were black and white, and looked like a beautiful woman in her late 20s. However, there was no love in those eyes, only a boundless black aura. With just a glance, I felt as if I had sunk into that black aura. The chi of the way in my body surged wildly, and the three sorcerer chi source stones collided chaotically. My consciousness began to blur. Right at that moment, the jade bracelet on my neck suddenly released a clear stream. After it quickly circulated through my body, I spat out a mouthful of blood and regained consciousness. Chapter 3:13. Yin Nantian grunted in pain next to me. I turned around and saw that Yin Nanshan's yang spirit shadow had dimmed a lot. Qin Yangding was even worse off. His eyes were closed, and his face was dark gold. Black blood flowed from the corners of his mouth and nostrils. Yin Nantian held him in his hand. He had fainted. I couldn't help but feel scared. What was that shadow? I'm still fine, as I've only just stepped into the middle stage of glorious memory, so it's still acceptable for me to be injured by a glance. However, Qin Yangting's cultivation is at the late stage of glorious memory, and he's a direct disciple of Mount Longhu. His skills are unfathomable, yet he was injured to this extent by just a glance from that shadow. There was no need to mention Yin Nantian. As a yang spirit strong that even the heaven master of the Han family could not defeat, he did not even think of attacking the black shadow. Once he came into contact with it, he immediately fled for his life. At this moment, he was also injured. Without waiting for me to speak, Yin Nantian slowly descended from the sky. When he landed, he didn't dare to stop to check his wounds. He dragged us and ran for several kilometers before stopping. The Yu family's orchard was in the suburbs. After running for several kilometers, it was a wasteland. Yin Nantian found a flat area and put us down. He didn't check Qin Yangting's situation. He sat down cross-legged and began to circulate his energy to adjust his breathing. Although I didn't think it was a big problem, I had vomited blood. I didn't dare to be careless. I also sat cross-legged to check my body. After confirming that I was okay, I exhaled in relief. If I wasn't wrong, that shadow was the source of the evil aura that had injured Lu Chuanda. Moreover, the murderer of Yu Fuda's murder was also that shadow. Yin Nantian had sensed that the aura in the well wasn't right, so he had run for his life. That shadow must be living in the well. When Yu Fuda killed Lu Chuanda, the blood pond was facing the well, and there was a passage connecting it. It wasn't just a coincidence. But what was that shadow's cultivation base? Why was it so strong? Normally, even if a Yin soul cultivated to the Yin spirit realm, its strength would be far inferior to a heaven master of the same realm. Not to mention that the Yang spirit true body was the natural enemy of Yin souls. This black shadow's realm was probably one level higher than the Yang spirit. I don't know how it compares to Tai Sui, but since I started cultivating apart from Tai Sui, this black shadow is the strongest thing I've seen. About 10 minutes later, Yin Nantian finally opened his eyes. The red light on the sun god phantom had dissipated a lot, and his body was more solid than before. It was obvious that he was fine. After he woke up, he glanced at Qin Yangting, who was still unconscious. Then, he turned to look at me and asked, "Why are you okay?" Of course, I wouldn't tell him about the jade bracelet's strange condition. I spread my hands to show that I didn't understand. Yin Nantian didn't pursue the matter any further. He turned his head and began to examine Qin Yangting's condition. After a while, Yin Nantian placed his hand on Qin Yangting's lower abdomen. He circulated his energy and his palm turned red. He slowly pushed up from his abdomen all the way to his neck before letting go. After repeating this process several times, Qin Yangting sat up from the ground. Black blood spurted from his nose and mouth. He opened his eyes and asked weakly, his face confused, "What happened?" After saying that, without waiting for anyone to reply, he seemed to suddenly recall the scene from before. His pupils violently shrank, and his face was filled with fear. He asked Yin Nantian, Master, just now that ghostly shadow, what was it? Yin Nantian didn't answer, but asked him to stand up. He looked around, found a direction, and led us forward. After walking for a long time, Yin Nantian sighed and said to Chen Yangting, that thing was a Jing ghost. Jing ghost. I was bewildered. I'd seen it before. Not only that, but Tong Tong had also put the Ghost King level Jing ghost into the jade bracelet. I was puzzled. How could a Jing ghost be so powerful? I've caught one before, but it had just reached the Ghost King level. Yin Nantian shook his head. Jing ghost is just a general term. The ghosts in the well are all called Jing ghosts. But in fact, Jing ghosts connect to the 9 serenities. I heard that this kind of deep well is connected to the netherworld. There are many great cultivators in the underworld. It's not strange that a Jing ghost with that kind of power appeared. But the heavenly path has its own rules. A ghost with that kind of power shouldn't come to this world. As he spoke, he fell into doubt. After muttering to himself for a long time, he suddenly said, that's right. This Jing ghost must be related to the Tai Sui giving birth to a true dragon. When Tianxiang had imitated the Shang dynasty's sacrificial ceremony to revive the southern dragon vein. However, the Shang dynasty's sacrificial ceremony had been abandoned a long time ago, and no words had been passed down. How did he find this method? I'm sure he had contacted the 9 serenities to summon the soul of the Shang dynasty's sacrificial ceremony to host this sacrificial ceremony. No wonder I found a seal on the well. After the sacrificial ceremony, when Tianxiang must have sent the soul of the Shang dynasty's sacrificial ceremony back to the well and sealed it. He wanted the soul to return to the 9 serenities. However, after hiding for 1,000 years, the soul finally broke the seal and came out of the well. And the previous case must have been caused by the soul. No wonder it had the Shang dynasty's totem. His speculation was the same as my own. I lifted my head to look at him. What should we do now? Since the soul has seen us, will it come back? Should we inform the people in the metaphysics world? Otherwise, if the soul comes back, it will bring us a big disaster. Yin Nantian looked at me oddly. If it didn't follow us, it won't trouble us anymore. As for the disaster, you don't even have time to take care of yourself. I stopped talking and didn't want to arouse Yin Nantian's suspicions. We didn't talk for the rest of the way. After walking for more than an hour, we arrived at the hotel where Yin Nantian was staying. When we entered the room, I was surprised to see Ling Duyu there. Seeing our group walk in, Ling Duyu stiffly stood there and didn't say anything. After Yin Nantian closed the door, he directly asked me, do you still remember the corpse sex corpse puppet refining technique? I nodded. Yin Nantian pointed at Ling Duyu and said, there's no time to lose. You should refine him into a corpse puppet now. I was surprised and asked suspiciously, he's a living person. How? Before I could finish, I suddenly remembered something and cried out, he's the corpse demon. Yin Nantian grinned. That's right. This is the place I've chosen for my body. Of course, I've always kept it with me. I turned to look at Ling Duyu. No wonder I always felt that he was dull and dull. He was actually that corpse demon. I didn't know what method Yin Nantian had used to make the corpse demon look like a human. Moreover, I couldn't see any flaws in his movements. While I was looking at him, Yin Nantian impatiently urged me to hurry up. I stopped looking at Ling Duyu and turned to smile at him. I pretended to be embarrassed and said, I can't refine it. Yin Nantian raised his eyebrows and said unhappily, what? Have you forgotten the refining technique? I shook my head. Of course I haven't forgotten. I've already refined a corpse puppet. If I remember correctly, I can only refine one corpse puppet. It's impossible to refine a second one. The moment I said that, Yin Nantian's expression became unfriendly as he stared at me. After staring for a while, he said, Brat, don't think that I won't dare to do anything to you just because I want to take your body. Is what you said true? I had already thought of an excuse, so I didn't hesitate. I nodded and pretended to be indifferent. As long as the corpse sect doesn't have any schemes, a corpse puppet can greatly increase one's strength. After obtaining the method, I will naturally find a way to refine one to protect myself. Yin Nantian was silent for a long time. After a while, he coldly said, Don't tell me that your corpse puppet is already dead. I shook my head. No, my corpse puppet is still fine. It's just that it's not by my side. Yin Nanshan's expression softened. He waved his hand as if he didn't want to listen to my explanation. He directly said, "Take me to find your corpse puppet." I nodded and didn't hesitate. I walked out of the shop. Yin Nantian left the ghoul here and took Qin Yangting with him to the feng shui metaphysics shop. I had already thought of a way to use Xiao Jin to deal with Yin Nantian. Since Yin Nantian was in such a hurry, it was within my calculations. According to the time, tonight was the time for Xiao Jin to transform. The only thing I was worried about was that Xiao Jin was the Tai Sui and Yin Nantian was the Celestial Master. It was impossible for him to not have this kind of vision. He would definitely recognize his identity. At that time, would he take the risk of possessing Xiao Jin's body? Chapter 314. Shortly after, we arrived at the shop. As I was about to lead them inside, Yin Nantian halted and placed his hand on my shoulder. He frowned and looked at the shop for a long time. He didn't say anything and walked in front of me, leading the way. The Yang Spirit Phantom had its own supernatural power. When it didn't want to show itself, ordinary people wouldn't be able to see it. Although Xie Changhua had the glorious consciousness cultivation base, he was just an ordinary person in front of a celestial master like Yin Nantian. He couldn't see Yin Nanshan's Yang Spirit. He could only see me and Qin Yangting. Xie Changhua quickly came to greet us. He looked anxious. It seemed he wanted to ask me about the situation. I raised my hand to stop him and told him that I had something to do upstairs. Then, I brought Yin Nantian and Xiao Jin upstairs. Xiao Jin was in the room upstairs. After going upstairs, Yin Nanshan's expression became increasingly solemn. When he reached the door, he suddenly stopped and fiercely extended his hand to grab my neck. Staring at me, he sternly asked, "Brat, what exactly is your corpse puppet?" I grinned at him and said softly, "Tai Sui." Yin Nanshan's expression froze. He cried, "What? It's the Tai Sui." When we were in the cave, Brother Yin, didn't you feel sorry that half of the Tai Sui's body had turned into the true dragon vein and couldn't be refined into a corpse puppet? Great minds think alike. I've thought about this before. I happened to meet a Tai Sui, so I refined it into a corpse puppet. I pretended to be relaxed and explained to him. After I explained, Yin Nantian shook his head in disbelief. "That's impossible. If you really refine the Tai Sui into a corpse puppet with its power, how could you be controlled by me so easily? Although I have the Yang Spirit cultivation base, I'm still far behind the Tai Sui. Kid, don't play tricks on me." Although he was cautious, Xiao Jin's situation was special. I didn't need to make up stories. I had a way to deal with him. I hurried to explain, "The corpse puppet I've refined is just a small Tai Sui. It looks like a child, and it doesn't have much power." Hearing this, Yin Nanshan's expression froze. Then, he shook his head like a rattle drum. He sneered, "Ignorant child, the Tai Sui is a strange creature. It lives and dies with the replacement of the 4U stars. Other powers cannot kill it. The corpse of the Tai Sui is a complete body. How can there be a young Tai Sui? Don't say such lies again. You'll only make a fool of yourself if you say it." I spread my hands. "Little Tai Sui is in the room. Whether it's real or fake, we'll know when we see it." When Yin Nantian saw that I was certain, his expression became hesitant. However, his previous solemn expression had disappeared. The reason was simple. Just like what he'd said, if I could control the power of the Tai Sui, I would have used it to deal with him long ago. Why would I be manipulated by him for so long? Yin Nanshan's face was filled with curiosity, not fear. After thinking for a while, he nodded and gestured for me to push the door open. When I opened the door, I saw Xiao Jin sitting on the bed. He was still playing with the remote control. He didn't watch the TV, but kept changing the channel. He had been playing this game for a month, but he was still very excited. When Xiao Jin saw me, he looked happy. He didn't move, but he turned his head and grinned at me. He didn't even notice Qin Yangting and Yin Nantian behind me. I moved aside to let Yin Nantian walk in front of me. I didn't say anything and just pointed at Xiao Jin. As soon as Yin Nantian saw Xiao Jin, his eyes widened. He stared at him for more than half a minute. Then, with a confused and excited face, he turned to me and said, "You're right. It's a young Tai Sui. His aura is correct, but he doesn't have any power. TSK, TSK. Creation is so magical. Kid, you're really lucky. What a lucky chance it was for you to meet him." I cracked a smile. Yin Nantian was right. Meeting Xiao Jin was my lucky chance. Yin Nanshan's eyes sparkled as he looked at Xiao Jin for a long time. He couldn't help but praise, "You're worthy of being the Tai Sui. Even my ghouls don't have this kind of intelligence. It seems you don't need to command it. It can sit, lie down, and walk on its own." I was surprised. Instinctively, I answered, "Xiao Jin has intelligence. He doesn't need my command." "He doesn't need you to command him?" Yin Nantian shook his head. "How is that possible? No matter how strange the Tai Sui is, it's just a corpse. A corpse is just a pile of dead meat. Unless it's a ghoul with intelligence, how could it move on its own? Moreover, the Tai Sui isn't an ordinary corpse. When a Tai Sui dies, a new Tai Sui will replace it. The Tai Sui's corpse emits endless witchcraft energy. It can't have intelligence. Otherwise, the ancient Tai Sui's corpse wouldn't have turned into the true dragon's bloodline." This time I was bewildered. Yin Nantian didn't know much about Xiao Jin, but I couldn't catch up with him when it came to knowledge. Moreover, he knew the nature of the witchcraft battles in ancient times. How could he not know the situation of the Tai Sui? More importantly, I started to have doubts about Xiao Jin. When Yin Nantian told me about the heavenly Tao's corpse, I thought that there were only 4 Tai Sui in this world, and that all the Tai Sui were heavenly Tao's corpses. I instinctively thought that Xiao Jin was also a heavenly Tao's corpse. That was why I wanted to refine him into a corpse puppet. But now, I understood that the so-called heavenly Tao's corpse referred to the Tai Sui's corpse, not the Tai Sui. Yin Nantian had wanted to refine the Tai Sui into a corpse puppet, but he was referring to the dead Tai Sui. However, Xiao Jin wasn't a corpse. He was a living Tai Sui. The corpse insect's corpse puppet refining method was effective on corpses. It was just a misunderstanding that I had used this method on Xiao Jin. It shouldn't have worked. However, the problem was that this method had worked. Xiao Jin had been refined into a corpse puppet. Why was it like this? It couldn't be because of the refining method. Yin Nantian didn't need to lie to me about this. Moreover, he was the great supreme elder of the corpsine sect, so he must have a good understanding of the corpsine sect's cultivation method. He couldn't be wrong. If there was no problem with the cultivation method, there shouldn't be a problem with me. Could it be that there was a problem with Xiao Jin? Thinking about this, I was even more confused. After refining the corpse puppet, the feeling of blood connection between Xiao Jin and me wasn't fake. Not only were our hearts connected, but we could also communicate with our thoughts. We were very close to each other. Moreover, Xiao Jin listened to everything I said. It was impossible for him to hide anything from me. If there was no problem with Xiao Jin, then what was the problem? After thinking for a long time, I still couldn't figure out the reason. When I came back to my senses, I raised my head and saw that Yin Nantian was still staring at Little Gold. His gaze carried a trace of suspicion, as if he had thought of something but didn't dare to confirm it. I wanted to ask him, but Yin Nantian didn't seem to have any interest in talking. He waved his hand and said, "Since you've already refined the corpse puppet, I don't have any other choice. I'll take this Tai Sui. Is there a secluded place nearby?" The Tai Sui's item isn't ordinary. I'm afraid that something strange will happen when we stay there. Our identities can't be exposed, so it's better to be safe. Hearing this, I was overjoyed. Yin Nanshan's words had solved the 2 problems that I was worried about. He didn't object to living in Xiao Jin's body. Moreover, he took the initiative to find a secluded place. When Xiao Jin transformed, I wouldn't have to worry about attracting trouble. Although I was excited, I didn't show it on my face. I faintly said, "We're in the city of Shenzhen, where every inch of land is worth its weight in gold. There are secluded places, but I'm afraid that we won't be able to find a place without people." Yin Nantian coldly snorted. "Since we're in the city, let's go to the outskirts. We'll find a place without people there. There's no time to lose." Let's depart now. He had finally fallen in my trap. Tonight was the night that Xiao Jin would transform. It was almost evening. When we arrived at the outskirts, it was almost midnight. Everything was unimaginably perfect. I was so happy that I almost went crazy. I pursed my lips and didn't say anything. Yin Nantian didn't doubt my attitude. When he brought me and Xiao Jin out, he pretended to be scared and said to me, "Brat, don't be too pessimistic. With this old man's experience in this life, along with your exceptional talent, your life will definitely be splendid. You won't have any regrets. Moreover, there's still a lot of time before you become a heavenly master. You still have plenty of time to enjoy your life. Think about it. You're a remnant of the witch tribe. If it weren't for me, you would have lost your life in that cave. If that's the case, every day that you live is a day that you've earned. Why do you have to frown?" He looked like he was comforting me, but he was actually mocking me. He didn't even try to hide the ridicule on his face. I gritted my teeth. Of course, I wasn't trying to hold back my anger. I was trying to stifle my laughter. Then, Yanantian brought us to call a car. We headed to the outskirts of the city. On the way there, I didn't dare to say anything. It was very difficult to endure. I kept thinking about Yin Nanshan's expression when he found out that Xiao Jin had returned to his original form. I didn't know if he would be more frightened or resentful. I wasn't sure. However, there was one thing that shouldn't be unexpected. His face wouldn't have the ridicule from before. Chapter 315. The Feng Shui Metaphysics Shop was in the northeast of Shenzhen. If we took a taxi from there to the suburbs, we would have to go in the northeast direction. The route Yin Nantian had chosen wasn't much different from the route I had asked Wang Kun to take me when Xiao Jin transformed. The final destination was in Longmen County, which was on the border between Hui Province and Heiyuan. It wasn't far from the place I had chosen last time. It was evening when we left. After we got off the taxi, I checked the time. It was around 11 o'clock p.m. If I'd felt a tinge of uneasiness before, I'd completely calmed down by now. Yin Nantian, that old bastard, had been thinking about me for a long time. Even if he grew wings, he wouldn't be able to escape today. After we got off the taxi, Yin Nantian looked around. He randomly picked a hill and took us there. While we were walking, I used divine sense to talk to Xiao Jin. I told him about the hostile relationship between me and Yin Nantian. I also told him what to do after he transformed and recovered his power. Xiao Jin's mind was pure. He didn't have any concept of good or evil. Killing people or saving people didn't mean anything to him. He didn't have any doubts about my arrangements. He nodded and agreed. After talking to Xiao Jin, Yin Nantian stopped. However, he didn't say anything. He just lowered his head as if he was thinking about something. After thinking for a while, he raised his head and stared at the full moon and the starry sky for a long time. He then turned his head and looked at me, then at Xiao Jin. He didn't say anything, but his face seemed to be filled with uneasiness. I was startled. Did Yin Nantian discover something? Cultivators' spiritual senses were stronger than ordinary people's, and their sixth sense was even stronger. They could predict the future. Moreover, as their cultivation base deepened, this ability would become stronger. Moreover, the Corp sect was also a branch of metaphysics. Although they mainly practiced other techniques, they had some knowledge about divination. It was possible that Yin Nantian had predicted something. However, I lowered my head and checked the time. There were only 2 minutes left until midnight. Even if Yin Nantian knew my plan, a mere minute wouldn't be enough for him to reverse the situation, let alone Yin Nantian. I was no longer worried. I met Yin Nanshan's gaze and smiled at him. At first, Yin Nanshan's eyes were filled with doubt. However, when he saw my smile, his pupils shrank. The sun god's shadow reappeared with the same red light that had appeared when he'd faced the terrifying well ghost. He stared at me vigilantly. After a few seconds, maybe it was because he saw that I didn't react, he relaxed a little and shouted, "Let's not waste any more time and do it right here. Quickly order the corpse puppet to stop, lie on the ground, and give up resisting." I stood still and didn't smile at him. I just looked into his eyes and shook my head. "Big brother Yin, when we were in the corpse sect, you gave me pointers and helped me increase my cultivation. At that time, I truly regarded you as a big brother that I could rely on and trust. But what about you? Everything was just to make use of me. From the very beginning, you've been scheming against me. Isn't it enough to harm me once? You've painstakingly continued to cause trouble for me. I just want to ask you, have you never had a conscience in your heart? Yanantian was obviously very anxious. He impatiently scolded me. Shut up. Do you think it's useful to try to befriend me at this time? Don't be so long-winded. Hurry up and order your Tai Sui corpse puppet to lie on the ground. I laughed self-mockingly. Yanantian was right. At this time, I should just do what I had to do. There was no need to be long-winded. I smiled at him again, but my expression slowly turned cold. You're right. I didn't come here today to befriend you. I came here to kill you. Xiao Jin, attack. When I said the last few words, only coldness and sternness remained in my voice. As I said that, Yanantian's expression suddenly changed. The scarlet light on his body suddenly surged. At the same time, Xiao Jin, who had been silently standing next to us, flew up. His clothes were torn apart and flew far away. In an instant, he returned to his original body that was dozens of meters tall. The golden light on his body was extremely dazzling. At the same time that his body grew bigger, countless strands of hair on his head whistled as they flew towards Yanantian. Yanantian wasn't bad. After he realized that something was wrong, he shrouded his body in a scarlet light. He burst forth with a speed that was even faster than when we had met the Jing Ghost during the day. He seemed to have turned into a red bolt of lightning as he shot past me and into the night sky. This old thing was extremely cautious. Once he realized that something was wrong, he didn't have any thoughts of risking his life. His only thought was to run away. Although this choice looked like a coward, I had to admit that being cautious was always the best way to save one's life. However, it was a pity that under the absolute difference in power, being cautious was useless. Moreover, Xiao Jin and I had been unprepared. Hence, Yanantian was destined to suffer a tragedy today. Xiao Jin's thick hair was extremely fast. Moreover, as he flung his hair, it also grew crazily. Even though Yanantian was as fast as lightning, he couldn't escape the fate of being tied up by Xiao Jin. In just a blink of an eye, Yanantian, who used to be high up in the sky, was tied up like a rice dumpling by Xiao Jin. At this moment, his eyes didn't have the teasing look anymore. Instead, they were filled with endless fear and confusion. He tried his best to turn his head to look at Xiao Jin's real body. He mumbled, "It's impossible. How could it be? It's impossible." When he finally got a hold of himself, the confusion in his eyes was gone. His eyes were filled with respect and flattery. He kept begging me, which was completely different from his previous image. I couldn't help but recall the first time I had met him in the corpse sect. At that time, he had used up all of his yang god power, so he was very respectful to me, a junior in the acupuncture realm. He even treated me as his peer. Unfortunately, when his yang god power recovered, he quickly changed his attitude. I didn't bother with him anymore. I just calmly told Xiao Jin, kill him. Xiao Jin was as loyal as a robot. Without any hesitation, he threw Yanantian's yang god shadow into his big mouth. He didn't even chew before swallowing it. I was slightly stunned. However, I thought that the yang god body might help Xiao Jin recover his power, so I didn't mind. I gently exhaled and turned to look at Chun Yangting, who was standing to the side in a daze. When he saw me turn to look at him, Chun Yangting suddenly came to his senses. His face was filled with fear. He lowered his head and bowed to me. He stammered, Brother Zhou, your corpse puppet is really strong." This fellow was quite intelligent. In his panic, he tried to curry favor with me to lessen the conflict between us. I didn't say anything and just smiled at him. Soon, Qin Yangting stopped talking and lowered his head to look at the ground. His face was deathly still. Just when I thought that he had accepted his fate, he suddenly raised his head. After taking a few steps forward, he knelt on the ground and said loudly to me, "Brother Zhou, I know that there is a deep grudge between us. There is no point in discussing who is right or wrong. As long as Brother Zhou doesn't kill me, I, Chun Yangting, am willing to become your slave. I will serve you from now on." If Brother Zhou doesn't feel at ease, I won't have any complaints, no matter if you make a Tao hard oath or use any other methods to control me. His actions were far beyond my expectations. No wonder Yin Nantian took a liking to him and accepted him as his disciple. The two of them were equally shameless. I looked at him with interest and asked, Chun Dao Zhang, you are the direct disciple of Celestial Master Zhang of Mount Longhu, a late-stage glorious memory grand cultivator and a hall master of the Celestial Master Mansion. Are you really willing to become a slave? Shen Yangting didn't hesitate at all. He immediately nodded and emphasized, if Master is worried, you can use any method. This fellow was really shameless. With the grudge between us, if I wanted to live in this situation, this was probably the only path I could choose. It wasn't hard to make a choice, but it was hard to be so decisive and without any hesitation. To tell the truth, I couldn't help but be tempted. Even though we were both in the glorious memory realm, Chen Yangting was different from Xie Chenghua and the rest. Chen Yangting's strength was exceptional, even stronger than mine. His future development was limitless, and he even had hopes of breaking through to the Celestial Master Realm. Taking him as a slave could greatly increase my strength. From another perspective, the grudge between Chen Yangting and me was that he had failed to kill me multiple times, and that he had heavily injured Tong Tong, causing him to still be unconscious. But thinking about it carefully, he hadn't done anything to me, and Tong Tong's current condition was rather stable. I didn't have a knot in my heart that I had to kill him. This was a huge temptation, and I couldn't even think of rejecting it. Unfortunately, what I shouldn't have done was that Chen Yangting tried to ally with me to deal with Yin Nantian in the cave. The proud expression on his face at that time left a deep impression on me. He was deeply proud of his status as a disciple of Mount Longhu. Even if Yin Nantian, a celestial master in the Yang spirit realm, accepted him as a disciple, he still wouldn't be willing to be my slave. If I kept him, he would be a disaster sooner or later. Chapter 316. After hearing my words, Chen Yangting's countenance changed several times. From begging to surprise, from surprise to anger, from anger to despair. That was all he could do. Xiao Jin was fast and didn't give him any time to react. He didn't even have the time to think about it. After dealing with Chen Yangting, I searched his body. I thought that he was an important person in the Celestial Master Mansion and that he would have many treasures and cultivation techniques. However, I didn't expect that he only had some talismans, a peachwood sword, and a wooden sculpture of the three pure ones. Apart from that, he didn't have anything else. I was a little disappointed. However, after checking the talismans, I became excited again. There were only 9 talismans left on Chen Yangting's body, but 7 of them were the kind of heavenly thunder talismans that he had used before, and their power was extraordinary. The other 2 talismans were the ones that had injured Tong Tong and could summon 3 bolts of lightning. According to the talisman, this talisman was called the Thunder Tribulation Talisman. The last one was an ordinary tranquil talisman. Moreover, it looked old and shabby. I didn't know when it was an antique. The Heavenly Thunder Talisman in Chen Yangting's hands had left a deep impression on me. I hated and was afraid of it. At the same time, I was envious of it. This kind of talisman was really powerful. When he used it casually, a bolt of lightning would strike down. It was so powerful and fast that even people with the same power couldn't resist it. Moreover, this talisman was the natural enemy of Yin spirits. It was also very practical. The only thing I was worried about was that this kind of talisman was the Celestial Master Sect's trademark. The Celestial Master Sect was famous for being overbearing and protective of its members. If the Celestial Master Sect found out about this, it would be troublesome. However, I thought that it wasn't a bad thing. If I encountered any trouble in the future, I could use the Heavenly Thunder Talisman in the name of the Celestial Master Sect. Perhaps it would have a miraculous effect. After carefully putting the talismans away, I turned around and gave the jade bracelet to Xiao Jin. When he transformed, it was the fastest time for him to absorb the true dragon vein. I had wasted a lot of time killing Yin Nantian and Chen Yangting. I couldn't waste any more time. When little gold started to absorb the true dragon's vein, I sat down cross-legged. Previously, when I was in the sacrificial cave, I was heavily injured by the Han family's celestial master. However, with the nourishment of the mysterious Een liquid and the subsequent increase in my realm, my injuries have long since healed. Now, I am sitting cross-legged in order to consolidate my previous increase in realm. From just glory of consciousness to glory of consciousness middle stage, my cultivation could be said to have increased by a huge amount. My foundation was very unstable, and I had to stabilize my realm as soon as possible. Otherwise, the increase in my cultivation might just be a flash in the pan, and I would fall back to normal. After about 2 hours, my cultivation stabilized, and I opened my eyes. As for Xiao Jin, as he absorbed the true dragon vein, his power was recovering at an extremely fast speed. The time it took for him to transform also became longer and longer. After persisting for so long, he finally couldn't take it anymore. His terrifying shaman energy slowly disappeared, and he returned to his original appearance. He chuckled as he walked over and returned the jade bracelet to me. Although Xiao Jin's usual speed in absorbing the true dragon's vein was slow, there was still some effect. Just as I was about to ask him to keep the jade bracelet, a small figure suddenly appeared on the jade bracelet. I looked at it. That sweet smile and adorable expression, it was Tong Tong. In that instant, my heart was filled with excitement. Tong Tong had finally woken up. At this moment, I couldn't care about Xiao Jin anymore. I extended my hand to grab the jade bracelet and anxiously asked Tong Tong, "Tong Tong, you've finally woken up? How do you feel? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Has your power been affected? Also, how did you turn into such a small figure? Is it because your injuries haven't fully recovered?" I was so excited that my mouth was trembling. I shot a series of questions at Tong Tong. Tong Tong smiled sweetly and leaped from the jade bracelet. After landing on the ground, her figure rapidly grew to the same size as before. She then said sweetly to me, "Big brother, my injuries have completely healed." Turning into a small person just now was a new ability that I learned. To me, it didn't matter what kind of new power Tong Tong had learned. The most important thing was her health and safety. I nodded with a smile and looked at her. After a glance, my smile froze on my face. It was because I saw electricity on her body. Tong Tong's pure black body sometimes had electric arcs of different lengths, just like the giant silkworm cocoon that she had turned into. Tong Tong lowered her head to look at me when she saw my expression change. Without waiting for me to ask, she smiled and stuck out her tongue. "Brother, I don't know what's going on with these electric lights. They've been like this ever since I woke up. However, my injuries have really healed and I don't feel anything from the electric lights. I can even control them." Then, she extended one of her slender fingers and gathered her power. I saw the electricity on her body rapidly gather at the tip of her finger, turning into a dazzling bead of electricity. It hovered above her fingertip and spun around. It was a beautiful sight. My eyes focused as I couldn't believe it. Tong Tong was a heavenly fetus, and her body had the purest Een energy. She could be considered the extreme of Een energy. The electric arcs were the remnants of the heavenly lightning that Chun Yangting's heavenly thunder talisman had summoned. Heavenly lightning was the strongest energy in the world, and it could be considered the extreme of Yang energy. It was because these two different energies had collided with each other that Tong Tong had been severely wounded. Even after a long time, neither Little Gold nor the Red Shadow could help her resist the power of the heavenly lightning. However, the scene in front of me had completely overturned my understanding. I didn't know what to do. After a long time, I hesitantly asked Tong Tong, "Try to control the electric arcs and attack this stone." Tong Tong's two large eyes blinked curiously, but he didn't ask any questions. He followed my instructions and suddenly waved his finger. The lightning bead released a streak of lightning that shot out at an extremely fast speed, disappearing into the stone that I had pointed out. I walked forward and picked up a stone. There was a small hole in the middle of the stone, which still had the faint aura of the heavenly lightning. Now, I was sure that Tong Tong could control the power of the heavenly lightning. It was hard to define the word control. Any able-bodied person could hold a basketball and shoot it a few times, but not many people dare to say that they could control the ball. Thus, when Tong Tong gathered the electric arcs, I still didn't believe that she could control the heavenly lightning. However, if she could extract the power of the heavenly lightning and use it according to her will, it was a completely different thing. Every object had its own power. Only when she could control the power of the object could she truly control it. After reaching this conclusion, I became even more confused. Why was it like this? Could it be that while I was unconscious in the cocoon, my eyes hadn't been resisting the power of the heavenly lightning, but rather they had grasped the essence of the heavenly lightning and completely absorbed it? If that was the case, then Tong Tong had profited from her misfortune. She, who possessed the extreme body, was most afraid of the power of heavenly thunder. Her greatest natural enemy was also the power of heavenly yin. Now, she had found the essence of the power of heavenly thunder and could even absorb and use it. From now on, the heavenly lightning would no longer be Tong Tong's natural enemy. As for the other yang energies, their nature was different from the heavenly lightning. How could Tong Tong be afraid of them? In other words, Tong Tong would no longer have any natural enemies. Even the yang energies that were supposed to restrain her would be absorbed by her and become her helpers. This was too terrifying. Both the Tao and Xian sect had the three corpses. The three corpses referred to a person's inner demon. They were the shackles of the human body that prevented people from pursuing the great Tao. After cutting them off, they could get rid of the shackles and cultivate with half the effort, easily becoming an immortal. From a certain perspective, Tong Tong was like cutting off her three corpses. From now on, she would no longer have any shackles. Her cultivation path would be smooth, and her speed would be faster than anyone else's. Chapter 3:17. I excitedly told Tong Tong about my conjecture. Tong Tong grinned. She was obviously very happy. However, after smiling for a while, she anxiously asked me about what had happened while she was unconscious. It was obvious that she didn't care about the ability to control lightning. Seeing this, I couldn't help but smile wryly. Even though Tong Tong had exceptional talent, she had only embarked on the path of cultivation because of me. She probably didn't like cultivation at all and wouldn't care about this kind of talent at all. Feeling helpless, I didn't mention it again. I smiled and sat down. I briefly told her what had happened after she had fainted. When she heard that I had been besieged by the 10 heavenly masters and that my life was hanging by a thread, Tong Tong looked anxious and worried. Tong Tong heaved a sigh of relief when she heard that Nan Gong and the others had saved me. However, when she heard that I had reunited with the Red Shadow, she became excited. Her eyes sparkled as she asked me, "Is Sister Red Shadow beautiful? Is she super powerful?" Ever since Tong Tong had been with me, I had often told her about the Red Shadow. Moreover, the jade bracelet that Tong Tong was in had been given to her by the Red Shadow. Tong Tong had always been a loyal fan of the Red Shadow. When she suddenly heard the news, her eyes were filled with excitement. As I talked about the Red Shadow, I couldn't help but smile. I briefly told her about the situation that I had been with her for the past few days. After listening to me, Tong Tong pouted. "Why did you leave after only a few days? Even if you left, you should have brought Sister Red with you. How could you leave alone?" I helplessly spread my hands and explained to her that the Red Shadow was trapped in the seal and couldn't leave the Fire God Temple for a long time. Tong Tong instantly clenched her small fists and cheered me on. "Sister Red is trapped in there. Brother, you must work hard to cultivate and become stronger. In the future, you could defeat the Fire God and save Sister Red. Then, we can live happily ever after." I swallowed my saliva and my eyes almost popped out. Tong Tong had been with me for the past few years and had read many love stories. She had always been moved to tears. I didn't expect that she would use what she had learned and make up stories for me and the Red Shadow. I didn't know if I should laugh or cry. I looked at Tong Tong's solemn face and couldn't help but smile. I promised him that I would work hard to cultivate and save Red Shadow. Tong Tong nodded happily. Then, she seemed to recall something. She solemnly promised me that she would work hard to cultivate and help me save Red Shadow. This little fellow was always so lovable. I extended my hand and rubbed her head. Tong Tong turned around and hugged my arm. She seemed to be enjoying it very much. At first, I wanted to ask her to temporarily return to the jade bracelet, but seeing her reluctant face, I didn't urge her. I turned around and called Xiao Jin to go back with us. Tong Tong knew Xiao Jin, but she didn't know that Xiao Jin had turned into a child and stayed by my side. When she heard me call Xiao Jin, she was stunned. Then, she exclaimed in disbelief. She couldn't even speak properly. She pulled me with one hand and pointed at Xiao Jin with the other. She stammered, Brother, is that really Xiao Jin? While asking, she stretched her hands and drew a big circle. Then, she continued to ask, Xiao Jin is so big and he is so small. How could he be Xiao Jin? I smiled and called Xiao Jin over. I briefly explained Xiao Jin's situation to her. Tong Tong nodded as if she understood. She hid behind me and peeked at Xiao Jin from time to time. Her small face was filled with curiosity. At this moment, Xiao Jin walked over and handed me a black cloth bag. I received it and found it familiar. I touched it and felt something that looked like a soft tube. Suddenly, I remembered that this cloth bag was the one Yin Nantian had used to capture the Xiang Lu yesterday. According to Yin Nantian, the Xiang Lu was a supernatural creature from the Desolate Age. It was an incredible treasure. However, he didn't tell me what it could do or how to use it. I held the cloth bag and pondered for a while. Xiao Jin, do you know what the Xiang Lu is? What are its effects? After Xiao Jin had returned to his baby form, he didn't have the wild and domineering aura of his real body. He looked dull. He thought for a while and shook his head. I only know that it's a Xiang Lu. If I swallow it, it's harmful to me. That's why I took it out when I swallowed Yin Nantian. I don't know anything else. I nodded. In that cave, Xiang Lu was the key to turning the Tai Sui's corpse into a true dragon's vein. He would be harmful to the Tai Sui. However, at this moment, I wanted to know what effect it would have on humans. I thought for a while and patted my back to summon the snake spirit. When we had captured the Xiang Lu, the spirit serpent had sensed it before Yin Nantian. I guessed it knew something about this thing. As soon as it appeared, the spirit snake's two small eyes instantly stared at the cloth bag in my hand. First, it shrank its head back with a frightened expression, then looked around and asked me suspiciously, Brat, why is this thing in your hand? I simply told it what had happened. The spirit serpent's big eyes brightened. It stuck out its tongue a few times, its face excited and greedy. It blushed and rubbed its head against my body. Its voice became flattering. Brother Zhou, you don't need this thing. Why don't you give it to me? I was surprised. Give it to you? Aren't you afraid of it? The snake spirit was honest this time and immediately replied, I'm afraid of this thing, but isn't it now that you've caught it? Although the Xiang Lu can eat dragons, it's also a dragon. Its bloodline isn't much different from a true dragon's. If I drink its blood, I'll have a higher chance of turning into a true dragon. You know that I'm just an ordinary snake. Although I can be considered a dragon's descendant, the dragon power in my bloodline is too weak. A true dragon's blood can only increase my dragon power. However, the Xiang Lu's blood can change my innate talent and make my bloodline closer to that of a true dragon. I nodded. The spirit serpent was right. No wonder the Xiang Lu could turn his shaman energy into true dragon saliva. It turned out that he was also a dragon. However, I smiled and didn't directly give the Xiang Lu to the spirit serpent. Instead, I looked at the spirit serpent with a faint smile. It's not that I can't give it to you, but you have to be honest and tell me all of its effects. Although the spirit serpent wasn't wrong, he obviously hadn't told me all of the effects of the Xiang Lu. The Xiang Lu definitely didn't only have the effect of increasing the purity of the dragon's descendant's bloodline. When Yin Nantian had gotten the Xiang Lu, he had been extremely excited. He didn't have the spirit serpent with him, so this thing would definitely be of great benefit to him. After hearing what I had said, the spirit serpent stuck out its tongue awkwardly. It chuckled and said, I was just about to tell you. The Xiang Lu has a pair of antennae. I heard that these antennae are helpful for you humans to break through to the Sky Master Realm. It seems that its body can communicate with shaman energy and Tao energy. You can convert at will, but it's not that useful. Don't worry, I only need its blood. I don't have any use for the antennae or body. I was shocked. The Xiang Lu's antennae were an amazing treasure that could help one break through to the Sky Master Realm. However, Yanantian was already at the Sky Master Realm. Even if the Xiang Lu had such an effect, he shouldn't be so excited. I thought for a while and understood. The Xiang Lu's body could communicate with shaman energy and Tao energy. Was it possible that Yanantian was going to convert his Tao energy into shaman energy? It was possible. No wonder he wasn't worried about me cultivating shaman energy. It turned out that he had already prepared for this. After I understood, I became more excited. The Xiang Lu really had a lot of treasures. The fact that the Xiang Lu could help people break through to the Sky Master Realm was enough to cause a dispute in the metaphysics world. Since ancient times, the Sky Master Realm had been a rare existence. It was the ultimate goal of all cultivators. Moreover, I had never heard of anything that could help people break through to the Sky Master Realm. The value of the Xiang Lu's antennae was obvious. Chapter 3:18. To be honest, if not for the Tao Chi encountering the heavenly barrier, I definitely wouldn't have chosen witchcraft or a glory. It was because of the dangers involved in cultivating witchcraft aura. After hearing the truth of the battle of witchcraft from Yin Nantian, I was filled with sympathy for the ancient shaman tribe, but that was all. I had never been an ambitious person, nor did I have the thought of cultivating witchcraft aura to seek justice for the shaman tribe. It wasn't that I didn't have a sense of justice, but I knew my own limits and couldn't bear the responsibility. In reality, witchcraft aura glory wasn't my own choice. It was just that I didn't know what solar eclipse meant back then, so I muddle-headedly took that step. Now that I thought about it, if I had understood everything back then, would I have stepped into the river in the illusion without hesitation? It was hard to say. Perhaps I would still step over it, but that would only be because I was burdened with the blood feud of my parents, so I had no choice but to do so. But now, a new opportunity presented itself to me. If I had guessed correctly, and Xiang Lu's body was that miraculous, I would still have the same cultivation after transforming witchcraft aura into Tao Chi. The heavenly barrier would naturally dissolve, and I wouldn't have to face the pursuit of the metaphysical world in the future. I could cultivate Tao Chi in peace. With my top-notch Four Meridians talent, I was almost certain that I would be able to break through to the Divine Master Realm in the future, and had a high chance of success. Even if I couldn't rely on my own talent, I could still use Xiang Lu's feelers. Everything seemed perfect, as though there was no need for hesitation. Strangely, the hand that I was holding onto the black cloth bag felt heavy. I couldn't help but recall many things from before. The figures of Nangong, Yi Pianpian, and Yi Maolon flashed past my mind. I was now certain that Nangong was a member of the shaman tribe. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been paying attention to me. Yi Maolon was most likely one as well. Although Yi Pianpian wasn't certain, judging from her decision to save me despite the danger, and her relationship with Yi Maolon, she was definitely related to the shaman tribe. That's right, there was also Xiao Jin. Although I still didn't know why Xiao Jin was so close to me, he had given me the black bead the first time we met. He had helped me many times in the future. He had even helped me get rid of Yin Nantian and Qin Yangding just now. All of them definitely hoped that I could continue cultivating witchcraft aura, either openly or secretly. If I chose to transform witchcraft aura into Tao Chi, I would be much safer, but would I let them down? Also, although I was tested to be a peerless Four Meridians talent at the Young Phoenix Gathering, I still feel that it's because I have 5 pillars of light, and those 5 pillars of light are the effects of shaman chi. If I gave up witchcraft aura, would I still have a witchcraft chi? Witchcraft, and a top notch with witchcraft? The more I thought about it, the heavier my heart became. The idea of transforming the shaman chi into the chi of Tao was slowly loosening, and then it was shaken. I had mixed feelings in my heart, and I couldn't make up my mind no matter what. Tong Tong, who was hiding by my side, seemed to have noticed my uneasiness. She shook my arm and asked, "Brother, what's wrong? Did the little snake make you angry?" I came back to my senses and grinned. I threw the messy thoughts in my mind to the side for the time being. If I couldn't make a decision, I would maintain the status quo. Anyway, the people in the metaphysics world couldn't find me. If I had to face a desperate situation while cultivating witchcraft aura, it wouldn't be too late to consider transforming witchcraft aura. Seeing that I didn't talk, Tong Tong looked at the serpent spirit with unfriendly eyes. The serpent spirit was so scared that he shivered and retreated. He tried to explain to Tong Tong, but Tong didn't listen to him. Two chains made of Yin energy with electric arcs appeared in his hands. He was ready to attack at any time. The serpent spirit didn't dare to talk anymore and try to hide behind me. Speaking of which, the snake spirit's current strength was probably not much worse than Tong's, but his fear of Tong had long been deeply rooted over the years. Moreover, he obviously knew that once there was a conflict between the two of them, I would definitely help him. Therefore, this guy had no intention of resisting at all. I smiled and pulled Tong Tong. "It's not the serpent spirit's fault." Tong Tong stopped. He shot the serpent spirit a fierce look and put away the supernatural power in his hands. Although he knew the general function of the Xiang Lu, the serpent spirit didn't know the details. He needed to study them later. I wasn't in a hurry to deal with the Xiang Lu. I packed the cloth bag and called Xiao Jin, the serpent spirit, and Tong Tong to go back. It was the morning of the next day when we returned to the Feng Shui metaphysics shop. When we entered the shop, Siet Changhua was sitting there anxiously. I didn't know what he was thinking. When he lifted his head and saw me, he jolted up. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but he didn't. He lifted his head and looked behind me for a long time. Then he exhaled in relief. "Boss, are you all right?" I smiled and nodded to comfort him. "I'm fine." However, I was curious. From Xie Chenghua's appearance, it was obvious that he had noticed something wrong when I brought Yin Nantian and the others here yesterday. However, his cultivation was only at the early stages of the glorious knowledge realm. Moreover, he had barely reached the glorious knowledge realm with the help of the obsidian stone. It was impossible for him to advance any further. How did he find Yin Nantian yesterday? Out of curiosity, I asked Xie Chenghua, "Did you notice something was wrong yesterday?" Xie Chenghua sat back on the chair and nodded. "Yes. When boss came back yesterday, I've seen that person with you in the capital before. He seems to be from the Celestial Master Mansion. His power is terrifying. I'm afraid that he's not far from the Celestial Master Realm." I saw that his expression wasn't friendly, so I didn't dare to say anything. "Boss, how did you offend such a fiend?" I was stunned. Then I smiled bitterly. I had thought that he had used some method to find Yin Nanshan's Yang God. It turned out that Chun Yanting had scared him to this extent. If he knew that there was a celestial master at the scene, wouldn't he have a heart attack? I didn't want to tell him too much and was prepared to brush him off. However, just as I was about to open my mouth, I thought about it and vaguely told him the truth. After hearing that, Xie Chenghua was dumbfounded. He stood there in a daze for a long time. Then, he reacted and asked me while trembling, "Boss, you're saying that you killed that person from the Celestial Master sect? And killed a Celestial Master's young god?" His expression was strange. He was afraid and suspicious, but at the same time, there was a hint of excitement. I smiled as I took out 2 Heavenly Thunder Talismans and handed them to Xie Chenghua. These are the Heavenly Thunder Talismans of the Celestial Master sect. They are very powerful. Below the Celestial Master realm, almost no one can match them. Keep them close to your body. If you encounter danger in the future, you might be able to escape with your life. However, you have to be careful. I found these talismans on the person from the Celestial Master sect. They might bring you trouble. It's best not to use them if possible. Subconsciously, after receiving the Heavenly Thunder Talismans, Xie Chenghua's expression changed again. His suspicion disappeared, but his fear and excitement increased. He lowered his head to look at the heavenly thunder talismans and then at me. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't say anything. I reached out and patted his shoulder. I didn't say anything and just took Xiao Jin to the second floor. I understood Xie Qinghua's thoughts very well. After discovering that I was in danger yesterday, he might have been worried about my safety, but he was more worried that if something happened to me, he wouldn't be able to remove the seal on his body. At the same time, he probably started to doubt my strength. At this time, it was necessary to have a heart-to-heart talk and show my strength. After all, he was now a great help to me. If he had any bad intentions, it would be very troublesome. As for whether he would spread the news or not, it wasn't important. Anyway, I was now a target that everyone in the metaphysics world wanted to kill. If I had too many lice, I wouldn't feel itchy. If I had too many debts, I wouldn't worry about it. It wasn't a big deal to have another enemy of the Celestial Master sect. After returning to the second floor, I didn't stay for long. After settling Xiao Jin down, I went out again. Yesterday, after coming out of the cave, Yin Nantian took me to see the corpse demon named Ling Duyu. If I wasn't mistaken, the corpse demon was still in the hotel room. Chapter 319. When I first saw that corpse in the Corpsine sect, I was scared out of my wits. The corpse had a huge amount of Yin energy, which was almost at the heavenly master realm. If the corpse hadn't gained intelligence and had a chaotic soul that didn't know good or evil, Yanantian and I wouldn't have been its match. It had been a year since we had escaped from the Corpsine sect. I didn't know how strong the corpse had become. Of course, it didn't matter if its power had increased or not. I wouldn't be its match. If Yanantian had awakened its spirit and recognized him as its master, I wouldn't have dared to provoke it. However, Yanantian didn't know about Xiao Jin. He had kept the corpse as a host so that I could refine it into a corpse puppet. That was why he wouldn't awaken the corpse's spirit or make it recognize him as its master. It was also because of this that I had the idea to subdue the corpse. After leaving the Feng Shui metaphysics shop, I arrived at Yin Nanshan's hotel. After finding the room, the hotel's door wasn't a problem for me, so I casually opened it. After entering, I saw that Ling Duyu, who had turned into a zombie, was still standing stiffly by the wall of the room. He didn't make a sound or move, just like a statue. When he saw me enter, he only turned his head slightly to look at me. Apart from that, he didn't have any other reaction. Although I had already predicted the corpse's situation, this was related to my safety, so I didn't dare to be careless. After closing the door, I didn't hurry to touch the corpse. Instead, I arranged several earth carrier formations around me. Then, I took out the yin-yang yama brush and the silver talisman that Grandpa Li had given me. Then, I carefully waved at the corpse, calling it to come closer. Hearing my call, the zombie quickly turned around and carefully looked at me a few times. Then it slowly lifted its feet and walked towards me. I heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed my speculation was correct. The corpse hadn't awakened its spirit, so it was still as pure as before. Just when I thought that I had succeeded, the zombie suddenly stopped after taking a few steps. Fear appeared in its eyes as it stood there in a daze. It hesitantly lifted its foot and put it down. Its face showed a panicked expression. No matter what I said, it didn't continue to walk towards me. I had just calmed down, but now I was tense again. However, after observing for a while, I found that the ghoul was just a little scared. It didn't have any other intentions, let alone hostility. How could this be? What was it afraid of? I lowered my head to look at the silver talisman in my hand and the earth-carrying formation under my feet. Regardless of whether it was the magic tool or the formation, they all contained a strong power. Although ordinary people couldn't see it, the ghouls were natural spiritual creatures, so they could naturally sense this aura. They were most likely afraid of me and didn't dare to walk toward me. After pondering for a moment, I left the earth-carrying formation and put away the magic tools and talismans in my hand. However, I didn't leave the earth-carrying formation too far. That way, if the situation turned bad, I would be able to return to the formation as fast as possible. After doing all of this, I called out to the ghoul again. This time, Although the ghoul's face still showed fear, it hesitated and slowly walked in front of me. It looked at me obediently with its wooden eyes. Its gaze was a little perplexed and curious. A warm smile spread across my face as I ran my hand over his face and then down his back. Slowly, the ghoul's nervousness subsided. It lifted its head to look at me, its face showing a gentle smile. At this moment, I could confirm that my speculation was correct. Next, I sat down next to the ghoul and gently asked, "I remember that the last time I saw you, you still looked like a child. How did you become like this now?" The ghoul tilted its face and looked at me. After a moment of silence, it softly replied, It was that grandfather. He made me become like this." "What?" I was stunned. "Changed?" "Originally, I thought that Yin Nantian had used some method to make the ghoul look like this. Why did it say that it could change?" I suspiciously looked at it. After thinking for a moment, I said, "Can you change back?" The ghoul immediately nodded, seeming to be happy. The corners of its mouth curved into a smile. However, it immediately retracted its smile and said with grievance, "I don't like my current appearance. I want to change back, but grandfather said that I can only change back when he gives me permission." I patted its back and softly said, as if I was coaxing a child, "That grandfather has gone to a faraway place. He won't be coming back. He asked me to take care of you, so you don't need to care about him. If you want to change back, you can do it." The ghoul's face instantly revealed a joyful smile. It excitedly asked, "Really?" When I nodded, the ghoul's body instantly changed. From the previous wooden young man's appearance, it turned back into the little zombie that I had seen before. I was stunned. This was a real transformation technique, completely different from the one I had used when I had used the EMO bead. The shifting ink bead was a magical item. It borrowed the power of Dao Qi to slightly change its shape and achieve the purpose of disguising itself. However, the zombie's transformation technique was completely different. The little zombie's appearance was not only completely different from Ling Duyu's, even its height and weight were different. It wasn't just a transformation, but a real transformation. After being shocked for a long time, I asked the ghoul, "How did you know this transformation technique?" The ghoul was bewildered and couldn't explain. It just said that it knew how to do it. It was an innate gift. I couldn't help but sigh in admiration. No wonder Yanantian had said that we were lucky that day. He had even said that the ghoul and Tong Tong were treasures in the world of metaphysics. In terms of mysticism, the ghoul was even better than Tong Tong. After the transformation, the ghoul's clothes were too big. I couldn't wear them anymore. I asked the ghoul to stay in the room while I went out to buy a set of children's clothes for the ghoul to change into. While I was changing, I found a small wooden box in the ghoul's pocket. The box was hollow, and there were some small holes on each side. When I shook the box, some gray gas flew out of the holes. I felt strange and asked the ghoul, "What is it?" The ghoul told me, "It's something that my grandfather gave me." Did it belong to Yin Nantian? I looked at it for a long time and then tried to pour my shaman energy into it. After a long time, I didn't see any reaction. When I was about to put it away, I suddenly had an idea. I left a wisp of shaman energy inside the box. Then, I looked at the ghoul and asked him to take 2 steps forward. As soon as my thoughts flickered, the ghoul lifted his feet and walked forward. I immediately understood. This small wooden box was what Yin Nantian had used to control the ghoul. It was no wonder he could make the ghoul transform into Ling Duyu. Besides the ghoul's innate gift of transformation, he also had to rely on this small wooden box. After hesitating for a while, I put the small wooden box back into the ghoul's new pocket. Since I could use this thing, I decided to leave it with the ghoul. Perhaps it would be useful in the future. After everything was ready, I took the ghoul back to the feng shui metaphysics shop. When we reached the room on the 2nd floor, the ghoul paled when it saw Xiao Jin. It was so scared that it hid behind me. In the corpse scene sect, the place where ghouls were born had the corpse of the Tai Sui. It could sense Xiao Jin's aura, so it was normal for it to be scared. I squatted and comforted it for a while. Then, I called Xiao Jin over. Xiao Jin was also interested in the ghoul. After talking to it for a long time, the ghoul's fear subsided a little. It trembled and sat on the edge of the bed. It still didn't dare to talk to Xiao Jin, but at least it didn't hide behind me anymore. At this moment, Tong Tong came out of the J bracelet. He smiled and approached the ghoul. Unlike Xiao Jin, the ghoul showed a friendly expression when it saw Tong Tong. When Tong Tong asked, it didn't hesitate or get scared. Soon, it started to talk to Tong Tong. I saw that the three of them were getting along well, so I smiled and left the room for them. Then I went downstairs. Xie Chenghua was still sitting downstairs. When he saw me, he cheerfully walked over and chatted with me. After receiving the 2 heavenly thunder talismans, he had adjusted his mood. The worried expression on his face had disappeared. After chatting with me for a while, he asked me about the previous case. I had gotten involved in that case because I wanted to save Lu Chuanda. But now, I have been busy for a long time. I had even experienced many dangerous situations, but I still hadn't found a way to save Lu Chuanda. Chapter 320. My plan to save Lu Chuanda was to use my incarnation to infiltrate the team of experts. I would find out the truth of this case and help Lu Chuanda get rid of his crime. However, I didn't expect that this case would become this big. There were 2 heavenly masters, and the last one was the Jing ghost. His power was terrifying. After thinking about it carefully, the original plan was actually successful. I had more or less figured out the truth of the matter. The problem now was that only I knew the truth of the matter. The other 2 people who knew the truth were already dead. Moreover, the police definitely wouldn't believe my one-sided story. Thus, I had to find a way to make other people believe in the truth. Then, I would use other people to convince the police. It wasn't hard to find a suitable candidate. It was Han Wen'an. He was from the Han family in Mount Qinling, and he had prestige in the Metaphysics Society. Most importantly, he had shown me kindness in the cave that day. It wouldn't be too dangerous to contact him. However, the Han family's heavenly master had come that day. If he had stayed with his 4th uncle, I wouldn't have had a chance to approach him. Of course, besides him, there was also Monk Miaojue. Although he didn't have a strong presence, he was still a member of the team. Moreover, contacting him would be much safer than contacting Han Wen'an. After making up my mind, I got up and asked Xie Chenghua to watch the shop. Don't let anyone go upstairs. Then, I left the shop. I had an idea, but if Han Wen'an and Monk Miaojue had left Shenzhen, it would be too late. I had to hurry. Moreover, this case wasn't only related to Lu Chuanda. It was related to the safety of the people in Shenzhen. I knew the Jing ghost's power well. If he got out of the cave, I didn't know how many people would suffer. Considering the fact that he had possessed Yu Fuda's body and killed many people, it wasn't something I was worried about. It was highly likely to happen. It wasn't hard to find information about Han Wen'an and the others. After leaving the shop, I contacted Wang Yongjun and asked him to investigate the case. At the same time, I hailed a taxi and headed to the Municipal Public Security Bureau. Halfway there, Wang Yongjun sent me a message. The situation was completely different from what I had expected. I thought that since the heavenly master of the Han family was injured and the true dragon vein was involved, Han Wen'an would go back. Moreover, Miao Ju didn't want to fight for the true dragon vein because the case wasn't finished yet. As a member of the expert team, it was possible that he would stay in Shenzhen. However, the truth was that Miao Ju had left, but Han Wen'an was still in Shenzhen. Moreover, I wasn't unfamiliar with Han Wen'an's residence. It was the hotel where I had gone to pick up Shermei. Yin Nantian, who had disguised himself as Professor Liang, was also a member of the expert team. It was normal for them to live together. Unfortunately, I hadn't thought about it. When we returned to the hotel, I hesitated for a while before going to the bathroom. I used the EMOB to disguise myself as Zhang Wenli. The Han family's celestial master was injured. There was a high chance that he had left Shenzhen to recuperate. That was why I dared to come here. However, with the existence of the True Dragon's vein, there was a high chance that the Han family would send someone over. Now, I only hoped that if the Han family really sent someone over, it wouldn't be the Celestial Master. Otherwise, I would really be playing with fire. The bad luck of the past 2 days seemed to have finally passed. When I found Han Wen'an's room, not only was the Han family Celestial Master absent, but the other members of the Han family were also absent. Only Han Wennan was there. When Han Wennan saw me, he was stunned at first. Then his face turned gloomy. He asked me coldly, "What are you doing here?" It was a good sign that he didn't attack me directly. Thus, I didn't mind his unfriendly expression. I nodded and smiled. "I have something to tell you. Let's talk inside." Then, I lifted my foot and prepared to enter. However, Han Wennan stood still and stared at me. His expression was still unfriendly. He said coldly, "Zhou-yi, we don't have a deep friendship. It's true that I don't want to attack you, but it doesn't mean that we can still be friends." I was stunned, then smiled wryly. In the end, Han Wennan still had too many things to worry about. However, the more he was like this, the more grateful I was to him. Even though he was under so much pressure, he still didn't attack me. That in itself was enough to show his friendship. I looked at him gratefully. Then I shook my head. "I'm not here to build a friendship. There's really something important that I have to tell you." Han Wennan was silent for a while. In the end, he moved aside and let me in. After we sat down, I didn't pretend to be polite. I told him what had happened after they left that day. I didn't even care about Yin Nanshan's identity. I only hid some things that weren't suitable to be told. After listening to my story, Han Wennan's expression completely changed. The coldness that he had deliberately maintained on his face disappeared. He asked me solemnly, "Is what you said true? Is that well ghost really that scary?" I nodded solemnly and said, "I'm telling the truth. Otherwise, I wouldn't have risked my life to find you." I've already informed him. As for how to deal with the Jing ghost, you have to think of a solution. According to my understanding, Han Wennan was a chivalrous person. Once he knew about the well ghost, he definitely wouldn't avoid this matter. So, the first person that came to mind was him. The facts proved that my choice wasn't wrong. After Han Wennan thought for a while, he quickly said to me, "If that's really the case, we can only report this matter to the Metaphysics Union. At the same time, we have to inform the police. I'm afraid that we'll have to gather the power of the Buddhist path and send many heavenly master experts to deal with the well ghost. However, if that's the case, the implications will be too great. Before reporting it, I have to confirm that it's true." I frowned. It wasn't because he didn't trust me, but because his words were too arrogant. I had clearly told him that Yin Nantian, who was in the heavenly master realm, almost couldn't escape from the well ghost. If he really wanted to confirm the truth of this matter, wouldn't it be the same as sending himself to death? If he really lured the well ghost out, even if he had 10 lives, they would all die there. I opened my mouth, but before I could persuade him, Han Wennan lifted his head and asked, "My fourth uncle has returned home to treat his wounds. The people sent by the family haven't arrived yet. If we want to confirm this matter, we can only rely on the two of us. Are you willing to go?" I hesitated, then decisively shook my head. He was willing to send himself to death, but I wasn't. Even if he didn't agree, I couldn't take such a risk. Unexpectedly, after seeing me shake my head, Han Wennan didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled and said to me, "I know this matter is dangerous, but what if I can guarantee our safety? Are you willing to go with me?" Guarantee our safety? Facing the well ghost. Even if the 10 heavenly masters who had besieged me at the back mountain of the Metaphysics Union came together, they wouldn't be able to guarantee our safety. Han Wennan was too arrogant. I was skeptical, but when I looked at Han Wennan's eyes, he didn't look like he was joking. After hesitating for a while, I gritted my teeth and agreed. Han Wennan's words were arrogant, but I knew he wasn't an arrogant person. If he said that, he must have a plan in mind. Taking a step back, I had the jade bracelet to protect my body. Even if we encountered danger, my chances of survival were much higher than Han Wennan's. If he wasn't afraid, I didn't have anything to be afraid of. After agreeing, I asked Han Wennan how he could guarantee our safety. He just smiled and didn't answer me. He only told me to meet him at the Public Security Bureau tomorrow morning. We would depart together then. When I returned to the Feng Shui metaphysics shop, I couldn't figure out how Han Wennan could save his life. Eventually, I decided to rely on myself to save my life. That night, I made several golden light talismans and pure yang talismans. These talismans were different from the ones I had made before. This time, I used my shaman energy to make scarlet talismans. They were very powerful, but they couldn't stop the well ghost. At the same time, I gave Tong Tong the lightning tribulation talisman I had gotten from Chun Yanting to summon 3 bolts of heavenly lightning. I asked her to activate this talisman if the situation didn't look good. I didn't sleep for the whole night. I had to use all the power I had. I hoped that if the well ghost was lured out, I would be able to escape with my life. After everything was ready, the sky was bright. I quickly packed up and went to the Public Security Bureau. Since I was still using Zhang Wenli's identity, when I arrived at the Public Security Bureau, the people there recognized me. It seemed Han Wen had also told them to take me to a car. They told me that Han Wen was waiting for me at a military base in the back. When I saw Han Wen, I was already at a military training base. Han Wen was sitting in a helicopter. When he saw me, he called me. I dizzily boarded the helicopter. After the helicopter took off, I saw Han Wen's smug face. I understood everything. This fellow had told me that the way to guarantee my safety was to take a helicopter. I had told him about the time Yin Nantian took me and Chun Yanting away. At that time, we were hovering in the air. The well ghost just glanced at us and let us go. There must be a reason behind it. Although Han Wen didn't know it, it didn't stop him from making deductions. Chapter 321. Riding a helicopter was a new experience. However, I wasn't really excited. Quite the contrary, I felt restless. This feeling came without any reason. It was an instinct of a feng shui master. Moreover, the higher we flew, the more restless I felt. Fortunately, the height of the helicopter was no more than 100 meters, which was acceptable. While I was getting used to the helicopter, Han Wen sat next to the pilot and told him what to pay attention to. While flying, he tried to fly straight up and down. I didn't need to ask to know that he was imitating the way Yin Nantian had taken us to escape. He wanted to use the shortest amount of time to escape from the well ghost pursuit. After watching the pilot's operation for a while, I couldn't help but worry. The helicopter's vertical speed was too slow. It couldn't be compared to Yin Nantian's speed. Just by relying on this speed of ascension, wanting to escape from the Jing Gui's pursuit was really out of thin air. After Han Wen finished talking to the driver, she returned to the back seat. I told her about my worries, but Han Wen didn't seem worried at all. She waved her hand and said, "We can't do everything perfectly. This is the best we can do. When the time comes, just be careful and don't get too close to the cellar." I was confused. If we didn't get close to the cellar, how could we lure the well ghost out? I wanted to ask him, but the helicopter was really fast. At this moment, we were close to the orchard. Several helicopters appeared next to us. Deputy Chief Zhang of the Municipal Public Security Bureau was sitting on one of them. He was accompanied by a few people who looked like leaders. They waved at us from a distance. Under the loud noise of the helicopter's propellers, we couldn't hear their voices. Han Wen and I waved at them. Then, the helicopters arrived at the destination. When I saw the dark entrance to the cellar one more time, I felt more restless. When I recalled the terrifying well ghost, I had the urge to turn around and run away. Han Wen, who was on the side, suddenly handed over something and asked me, "Do you know how to use a gun?" I lowered my head and saw that it was a 1-meter-long rifle. I didn't take it. Puzzled, I asked, "Why are you using this?" Han Wen smiled. "The bullets in this gun are all specially made. There's a small spirit gathering array hidden inside the bullet. When the bullet is shot out, as long as you use your Dao Qi to instantly trigger the array, the bullet will carry a strong Dao Qi. It is very effective against ordinary ghosts, even against ghosts at the level of Ghost Marshal and Ghost King. It can also have a certain restraining effect." I was bewildered and looked at him helplessly. "Do you want to use this to deal with the well ghost?" Han Wen shook his head. "Of course not. We're not here to deal with the well ghost today. We just need to lure it out. With this thing, we don't need to get close. We could just shoot from afar. The Dao Qi in the warhead isn't much for the well ghost, but if many warheads are fired at the same time, the Dao Qi fluctuations won't be small." Now, I finally understood. No wonder Han Wen was so confident. It turned out that he was preparing to do this. I reached out to receive the rifle and checked the aim. I've never used this thing before. I need to try it out. Han Wenin nodded. There are 2 boxes of bullets on the helicopter today. You could try it out. Ordinary people needed to go through a lot of training to master firearms. However, with my cultivation base, both my physical and mental power were much stronger than ordinary people. I only needed 2 or 3 tries to master it. It was true. I aimed at the entrance of the cellar on the ground. The first 2 shots missed the target. However, I soon got the hang of it. From the 3rd shot onward, I hit the target. Every shot hit the center. After seeing that my shooting had stabilized, the pilot adjusted the helicopter. He hovered the helicopter around 60 to 70 meters above the cellar. Then, he opened a movable panel that was half a meter square. Han Wenin and I didn't say anything. We crouched and placed the rifle in the firing hole. We used Dao Qi to wrap the barrel completely. Then, we switched the rifle to continuous shooting mode and pulled the trigger. A large number of bullets shot out. As soon as they came out of the barrel, we used Dao Qi to activate the small spirit gathering formation inside. Then, we carried a large amount of Dao Qi and roared towards the entrance of the cellar. In rapid fire mode, it only took 10 seconds for us to fire a full magazine of 50 bullets. After we finished firing, the helicopter pilot who was standing on the side immediately passed us another magazine. The 2 of us didn't stop firing. After firing over 1,000 bullets, Han Wenin raised her hand and signaled for me to stop. Then, she stared at the dark entrance of the cellar with a burning gaze. After staring for 2 minutes, there was no movement. Han Wenin frowned and reloaded another magazine. He said, "Let's keep shooting." As soon as he said that, before he raised a rifle in his hand, my expression suddenly changed. I shouted in an almost distorted voice, "Hurry, hurry up and go up." I only had time to shout 4 words. Then, my head seemed to have been hit hard. My voice stopped abruptly. A cold and gloomy aura surrounded me. However, the moment my vision darkened, the jade bracelet on my chest released a warm current that circulated through my entire body. Instantly, I woke up. When I opened my eyes, my heart was pounding. Just a moment ago, the shadow of the well ghost had appeared at the entrance of the cellar. It looked exactly the same as the last time. With just one glance, I had fallen into its trap. I tried to suppress the fear and discomfort in my heart. I gritted my teeth and looked down. However, the well ghost had disappeared. It was as if he had never appeared. I exhaled in relief and lifted my head to look. Han Wenin was lying on the ground with a dull face. His teeth were clenched, and his face was dark. His eyes weren't closed, but only the whites of his eyes could be seen. He didn't look too good. The pilot had just sat in the pilot's seat. He hadn't had time to control the helicopter yet. His 7 orifices were bleeding, and he leaned against the seat. He was dead. I hesitated for a while. I wanted to take off the jade bracelet and place it on Han Wenin's body to see if it would work. However, before I could do that, a small ball suddenly emerged from under Han Wenin's shirt. It spun crazily through his shirt. It even moved his shirt, twisting into a small ball. After half a minute, Han Wenin opened his mouth and vomited a mouthful of cold, dark blood. Then his eyes rolled back and closed. The dark color on his face eased a lot. After a while, he opened his tired eyes. At first, he looked at me in confusion. Then, he furrowed his brows and sat up. His face was still filled with fear. "Where's that thing?" he asked. I shook my head. It disappeared. I think it returned to the round well down there. Han Wenin exhaled and wiped the dark blood from the corner of his mouth. Then, he carefully turned his body and looked down. After confirming that the well ghost was gone, he closed the partition. He was dumbstruck for a long time. Then, he said to me, "You're right. I'm afraid we'll need a few heavenly masters to subdue this thing. It's too scary. Too scary." He had always been a calm and tenacious man. If he could sigh with emotion, it was enough to prove how shocked he was right now. Yesterday, because he didn't trust me, I had only told him how scary the well ghost was. I didn't tell him about Yin Nanshan's speculation about the well ghost's origin. Now, it was time to strike the iron while it was hot. I told him Yin Nanshan's speculation. After listening to me, Han Wenin's face became more solemn. At this moment, he had seen how scary the well ghost was. Of course, he didn't doubt his speculation. As the son of the Han family, he understood what it meant to have the ghost of the Shang dynasty's sacrificial offering from the netherworld. After keeping silent for a long time, Han Wennan got up from the ground. He didn't say anything, but from his expression, I could tell that I had achieved my goal. After getting up, Han Wennan wanted to ask the helicopter pilot to take us down. However, the moment he opened his mouth, he found that the pilot was dead. Han Wennan sighed and moved the pilot's body to the back of the helicopter. Then, he sat down and operated the helicopter. After flying for a while, he slowly landed on the ground. Not long after we landed, many armed policemen and the leaders of the other helicopters gathered around. After taking the pilot's body away, Han Wennan stood with the leaders of the Municipal Public Security Bureau and discussed for a long time. Then, the leaders, led by Deputy Chief Zhang, turned around and left with solemn faces. They got into the police cars not far from us and drove away. I walked over and was about to say goodbye to Han Wennan. Suddenly, a car drove over. Han Wennan didn't wait for me to speak. He opened the car door and got in. He hesitated for a while, then said to me, "Our Han family can't give up on this true dragon vein. You know the situation down there better. Do you want to come and take a look?" I was bewildered. Then I reacted. After I had found the well ghost, I had forgotten about the true dragon vein. However, Han Wennan had learned Yin Nanshan's real identity and the fact that he had left us a long time ago. Now he was interested in the true dragon vein. As a member of a metaphysical family, I could understand why he couldn't forget about the true dragon vein. However, the cave in the true dragon vein was connected to the well where the well ghost was. Wasn't he afraid of danger? I hesitated and asked. Han Wennan shook his head. "We've been here for a long time, but nothing happened. It proves that the well ghost won't come out of the well easily. As long as we don't go through the well, it won't be a big problem." "Don't go through the well? How can we get in there?" Han Wennan saw my doubt. He didn't wait for me to ask and explained, "Last night, I arranged for people to dig a new cave not far from the true dragon vein. It's almost done. We'll go there from there." I thought for a while. These 2 days, I had digested all the witchcraft energy I had absorbed last time. If I went down there again, I could absorb more. Perhaps I could break through to the 4-star knowledge level. I wasn't worried about my safety. If Han Wennan wanted to deal with me, he would have done it already. He wouldn't have waited until now. I nodded and agreed. Han Wennan and I got in the car. After driving for 4 or 5 kilometers, we arrived at a farmer's house near the orchard. This place was next to a small river, and there were 3 farmhouses scattered by the river. I guess the residents had moved away. In the yard that we entered, there was a large excavating equipment. Workers were busy working around it. After we entered, a middle-aged man came to report to Han Wennan. "We've dug more than 20 meters and reached the hard rock. The workers are preparing to blast it." Han Wennan nodded and asked me to sit down and wait. Around 10 minutes later, there was a deep explosion. The last piece of rock was blasted open. Han Wennan stopped the workers who were about to go down to check. He went to check it himself. Then, he whispered into the middle-aged supervisor's ear, asking him to dismiss all the workers. After everything was done, only the 2 of us were left. Han Wennan found 2 ropes and threw them into the hole. He went down first along the ropes. I immediately followed behind him. Not long after entering the hole, we smoothly passed through the layer of rock that had been blasted open. When we reached the surface, we looked around. Han Wennan's calculation was correct. We were in the cave. We could still see some of the broken terracotta statues. Moreover, the aura of the true dragon's vein and the witch's aura were coming. We weren't far from there. Han Wennan grinned. He was in a good mood. He pointed to the front and said to me, "Let's go. We should check the true dragon's vein. This time, it's all thanks to Brother Zhou. After the Han family has completely taken over the true dragon's vein, we will definitely reward you." I bitterly smiled and shook my head. Right now, I'm a stray dog that everyone wants to beat up. I'm content to just live an ignoble existence. Forget about the reward. As long as Brother Han allows me to cultivate for 4 hours today, it will be enough. Han Wennan opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. In the end, he just nodded and said, "All right, let's go." After he finished speaking, he lifted his foot and was about to walk forward. But at this moment, there was suddenly a shocking wave of chi of the way behind us. Han Wenan and I both changed our expressions. There was actually someone lying in ambush here. The person who had ambushed us was extremely powerful. In a hurry, I had mobilized all of my witch's aura. However, I could only tilt my body to the side. Then I saw a white sword light that was wrapped in surging Dao Qi. It slashed at my side. Although the sword light didn't hurt me, the surging Dao Qi tore off a piece of flesh from my shoulder. My entire sleeve was also torn off, causing blood to gush out. Han Wenin wasn't much better off than me. His chest was bleeding profusely. Even his forehead was bleeding, causing his entire face to turn red. I suppressed the anger in my heart and turned around. When I lifted my head to look, I was stunned. Behind us, a bearded man in a white robe stood there. He held a white sword in his hand. There were still traces of blood on it. The person who had ambushed us was Zhang Canwen. Chapter 322. I looked at Zhang Canwen in surprise, but he didn't pay attention to me. His gaze was focused on Han Wenan, but he didn't put down his sword. He sneered and said, "I was wondering who was causing trouble. It turns out to be the Han family of Qinling Mountains." Zhang Canwen's reputation in the Metaphysics Society wasn't low, so Han Wenan also recognized him. That's why his expression was similar to mine. After being stunned for a while, he cupped his hands and said, "Director Zhang, did the headquarters send you? You've misunderstood. I found this place a few days ago and reported it to the headquarters. Didn't the headquarters tell you about this? You found it?" Zhang Qinwen raised his eyebrows, and his smile became playful. He kept silent for a while before he asked, "Tell me about the situation here." Only then did Han Wenan heave a sigh of relief, and he relaxed a little. He briefly explained what had happened a few days ago. In the end, he hesitated for a moment before saying, "My fourth uncle was injured and has left. However, the headquarters have agreed to let our Han family temporarily take over this true dragon vein. The Han family will also send another group of people, and they will probably come later today." Zhang Canwen's expression instantly turned gloomy after listening to his story. He stared at Han Wenan and said coldly, "They agreed to let your Han family take over? The Metaphysics Association is really generous, but did your Han family ask for my opinion?" Han Wenan was stunned. His relaxed expression instantly tensed up again. However, he tried his best to control his emotions. He asked curiously, "What do you mean by that, Director Zhang? Why would the headquarters ask for your opinion?" "Ha!" Zhang Qinwen chuckled softly. After a while, he stopped laughing. "Why? Because this is the ancestral land of Mount One. How can your Han family just accept it? What do you think our Mount One is?" What? Not only was Han Wenin shocked, but I was also shocked. This strange and ancient cave was the ancestral land of Mount One. I instantly recalled what Yan'an Tian had said. He had said that when Tianxiang had presided over the construction of this place to fight for the nation's fate. At that time, I wondered if this place had something to do with Mount Wen. I didn't expect that my guess would be correct. I immediately became anxious. This was Mount Wen's ancestral land. With how much Zhang Canwen valued his sex inheritance, he most likely wouldn't be willing to abandon this place. Moreover, Han Wenan wasn't a benevolent person. In order to obtain the true dragon vein, he definitely wouldn't be lenient. What should I do? Before I could understand what was going on, Han Wenan made his counterattack. He raised his head to look at Zhang Canwen, and his previous politeness disappeared. He revealed a cold smile and asked, "Director Zhang, it's easy for you to say. I've looked through this true dragon vein from top to bottom, and there aren't any traces of sex inheritance. Even the tunnel that we came in through was discovered by accident. If Director Zhang wants a share of the true dragon vein, then this reason is a little far-fetched." Zhang Canwen didn't want to give in at all. He immediately retorted, "Childish. I didn't see you discover any tunnel. Then tell me, how did I come in? If you really looked inside and out, you would have discovered that there was a crack in the mountain wall opposite the dragon's head that people could enter and exit through." Han Wenan's expression froze. but he quickly adjusted himself. He didn't want to argue with Zhang Kanwen anymore, and his tone became even more unyielding. Even if you found another tunnel, so what? There aren't any people from your mountain guarding this place, and there aren't any buildings from your sect. What kind of ancestral court is this? Director Zhang, I advise you to stop being unreasonable. In the afternoon, a large number of people from the Han family will come to take over this place. My father will also come personally. If you continue to pester us endlessly, it won't look good. This was the second time he had emphasized that the Han family would come soon. It was clear that he wanted Zhang Kanwen to back off. Unfortunately, Zhang Kanwen didn't intend to follow his advice. Instead, he clenched the long sword in his hand and said coldly, "If the Han family wants it, they have to ask the sword in my hand first." Seeing that the two of them didn't agree with each other and looked like they were about to fight again, I quickly stood up and called out to Han Wennan. Then I walked to Zhang Kanwen's side and whispered to him, "Brother Zhang, I'm Zhou Yi. Come with me." Then I walked to a terracotta statue far away from Han Wennan. Zhang Kanwen was still in the same place, but he looked as if he had seen a ghost. He stared at me for a while, then turned to look at Han Wennan. Then he hesitantly walked over. After he came over, I disconnected the Tao energy transmission from the e-ink bead. Soon, my appearance changed, and I returned to my original appearance. Zhang Kanwen's eyes widened. I took out the EMO bead and briefly explained the situation to him. Only then did his expression soften. Looking at Han Wennan in the distance, he whispered to me, "What's going on? How did you end up together with him? He didn't notice your true identity, right?" Although I knew that Zhang Kanwen didn't dislike me because of my identity as a witch, I couldn't help but feel warm when I heard his concerned words. I grinned. It's okay. He already knows my true identity, but he doesn't want to deal with me. What he just said is true. I've been participating in it under an alias. My purpose is different from theirs. It's a long story, so let's not talk about it for the time being. But why are you here, Brother Zhang? Is this really the ancestral land of your Wenshan lineage? Zhang Kanwen nodded. This isn't only the ancestral land of our sect, but it's also the burial place of our sect's ancestors. This time, I came here with my master's ashes. I also wanted to take all the ancient copies of the Song of Righteousness away from here. I didn't expect that as soon as I came in, I would find that something was wrong. Then, I heard an explosion from above, so I came here to ambush. My heart skipped a beat as I thought, this isn't good. If this was just the ancestral land, I could persuade Zhang Kanwen, and he might agree to give up. However, this was the burial place of Wenshan lineage's ancestors. How could Zhang Kanwen abandon his ancestors' remains and allow the Han family to take over this place? So what if he wasn't willing? He was the only descendant of Wenshan lineage, while I was a remnant of the witch tribe that everyone hated. Neither of us had the power to go against the Han family. After hesitating for a long time, I braced myself and said, "Brother Zhang, I know that this place is important to you, but the true dragon vein is too precious. The Han family definitely won't give it up. The metaphysical union won't give it up either. If you insist on protecting this place, I'm afraid." Unexpectedly, before I could finish, Zhang Kanwen sighed and interrupted me. "You don't need to tell me that. I just want to chase away Han Wennan and take away my master's and my ancestors' ashes. As for the other things, I don't have any extravagant hopes." I cheered up and told him, "You don't need to do that. I'm going to talk to Han Wennan. As long as it doesn't involve the ownership of the true dragon vein, he won't refuse." Zhang Kanwen sighed and didn't say anything else. He just nodded in silence. Just as I had expected, after Han Wennan got to know Zhang Kanwen's idea, she also let out a long sigh and readily agreed to it. Then, Zhang Kanwen returned to the big cave where the true dragon vein and the Tai Sui were. He collected old Zhao's ashes, which he had brought here today. Then, he walked into the cave. "I want to go to the sacrificial altar to collect the other ancestors' remains." After listening to him, Han Wennan and I changed our countenances. We pulled him back and didn't let him go to the sacrificial altar. I told him about the well ghost. Hearing this news, Zhang Kanwen's expression also changed greatly, and he asked involuntarily, "That thing really came out? That thing?" I was bewildered. Before I could ask, Jean Camwin hurriedly explained, "There's a saying in my school. It's been passed down from generation to generation. It says that there's an ancient spirit imprisoned in that well. One day, it will break the barrier and come out." I always thought it was just a legend. I didn't expect it to be true. I thought for a while and understood. Yin Nantian had guessed that the well ghost was summoned from when Tianxiang's ethereal palace when he used the ancient sacrificial ritual. Then, it was imprisoned in the well. If that was the case, it was reasonable for Wen Shan's school to record this story. I was about to ask Zhang Qianwen not to go there. It wouldn't be too late to collect the ancestors' ashes after dealing with the well ghost. However, before I could say anything, Zhang Qianwen said with a serious face, "If that ancient ghost really comes out, I have to go to the sacrificial altar." Chapter 323. Wen Shan's lineage had a way to deal with the Jing ghost. Moreover, it had been passed down from generation to generation. This situation was beyond my expectations. However, after thinking about it, I found it to be reasonable. In order to protect the country, Prime Minister Wen had summoned the Jing ghost from his ethereal palace. How could he not know the danger of the Jing ghost? At that time, he might not have thought of a way to send him back, so he imprisoned him in the well. However, this matter was caused by him after all. In the following years of imprisonment, he would have plenty of time to think of a way to solve this problem. The ancestral method that Zhang Canwen had mentioned was something that Wen Tianxiang had thought of and given to his disciples. Han Wenan and I couldn't help but feel happy. We hurried to ask Zhang Canwen if his method was difficult and if he needed any help. We were sincere in our questions. We weren't trying to brush him off. If we could deal with the Jing ghost, we wouldn't have any obstacles in rescuing Lu Chuanda. Also, we would be able to find peace of mind. To Han Wenan, if the Han family wanted to obtain the true dragon vein, the Jing ghost was an obstacle that they couldn't avoid. Without Zhang Canwen, the Han family would have to do it themselves. With the Jing ghost's power, even if the heavenly masters of the Han family came out, they might not be able to deal with it. Even if they could, the heavenly masters of the Han family would be injured. To a metaphysical family like theirs, if the heavenly masters died, it would be a serious blow. Zhang Canwen hesitated and nodded. "This method is difficult and troublesome. I don't need your help. You two can come and help me hold the line." Hearing his words, Han Wenan and I heaved a sigh of relief. Then, we hesitated. Han Wenan and I had the right to speak about the Jing ghost's power. He had only glanced at us, and we had almost been killed. If we really had to help, it was hard to say if we would have the courage to do so. Even if Zhang Canwen said that we would go and hold the line, we wouldn't be able to do so. We would be very close to the Jing ghost. If Zhang Canwen couldn't deal with it, we wouldn't even have a chance to escape. However, after hesitating for a while, we agreed in unison. Although this was the last instruction of Zhang Canwen's teacher, we had the same interests. How could we sit on the side and watch others take the risk to help? Furthermore, Zhang Canwen and I were close friends, so it was only reasonable for me to go with him. Han Wenan had always been a stalwart man. For the sake of the family's interests, he could not avoid doing some dirty things. But outside of the family's interests, he was still a dignified man, so he naturally did not have any dirty thoughts. After discussing, I asked them to wait for a while. Then, I walked to the foot of the Tai Sui's corpse and tried my best to absorb the witch qi. Different from Tao energy, shaman energy was absorbed really quickly. When I reached glory of knowledge, it only took a few minutes during the solar eclipse. Last time, when I broke through to glory of knowledge, it didn't take long either. Thus, after sitting under the feet of the Tai Sui's corpse for 10 minutes, I opened my eyes and got up. 3 stars and 4 stars of glorious consciousness are collectively known as glorious consciousness middle stage. The reason is that there is no boundary or difficulty between 3 stars and 4 stars. It is very easy to reach. So, after I stabilized my realm, I charged to glorious consciousness 4-star perfection in one go. As for breaking through to the 5-star glorious consciousness realm, I merely sat down and attempted a little before decisively giving up. Don't bite off more than you can chew, but this is the truth for both ordinary people and us cultivators. From a certain point of view, it is even more important for cultivators. Greed is the first original sin of cultivation. No matter when, we have to be cautious. Moreover, in just a few days, I'm already very satisfied to reach Glorious Consciousness 4-star from Glorious Consciousness 1-star. My only regret is that when the people from a Han family come, I won't have a chance to come to this natural cultivation place that the Taisue's corpse had created. After I got up, I left the cave with Han Wenan and Zhang Kanwen. We walked along the cave towards the sacrificial altar. Along the way, I asked about the fatty. When I had asked Yang Kai-chun to help me investigate, he had contacted Zhang Kanwen. At that time, Zhang Kanwen had coincidentally met the fatty. He had even taken a photo of the fatty and sent it over. At that time, I had only confirmed the fatty's safety. Now that I had met Zhang Kanwen, I naturally had to ask about it in detail. However, when I asked, Zhang Kanwen only shook his head at me and didn't say a word. Just as I was feeling confused, Han Wenan hurriedly explained to me, "Just now, when you were cultivating, Brother Zhang told me that he was going to Seal's spirit accumulation to deal with the ancient evil spirit." Seal's spirit accumulation? I nodded. In Buddhism, there was a saying called silent Zen. Buddhists often said that opening one's mouth was a sin. It was similar to what ordinary people said. Misfortune comes from the mouth. Buddhists believed that those who kept their mouths shut would achieve the Buddhahood. There was even a monk with great virtue who said, "If you don't talk for 20 years, even the Buddha can't do anything to you." Although I didn't know what Zhang Kanwen meant by Seal's spirit accumulation, I guessed it was the same as the Buddhist silent Zen. I didn't talk anymore and walked in silence for around an hour. Eventually, I reached the stone room where the sacrificial altar was. As soon as I got there, I became tense. I carefully mobilized the Tao and shaman energy in my body and put my talismans and magic tools in a place where I could use them at any time. Although all my preparations would be useless if the Jing ghost attacked me, it was still a form of psychological comfort. Han Wenan and I were similar. Their faces were solemn as they held the leaf-shaped magic tool and the small ball-shaped magic tool in their hands. However, Zhang Kanwen was different from the two of us. His face was solemn, but his body was calm. He didn't prepare anything and just walked toward the round well. Instinctively, I wanted to call him and ask him to be careful. However, I didn't say anything. I just stood there and quietly watched him. After checking the well, Zhang Kanwen turned around and waved at me, signaling me to go there. I was bewildered for a while, then braced myself and walked toward him. As soon as I took 2 steps forward, Han Wenan hurried to follow me. She didn't say anything and just followed me to the well. Lifting his eyes to look at the round well, it was still the same as before. The well water was level with the edge of the well. The well water looked very clear, but there was only darkness at the bottom. Nothing could be seen. I looked at the altar next to the well. There were some dents on the ground. It was obvious that Han Wenan and I had shot at it. However, there was no mark on the rim of the well. In theory, if so many bullets had hit the altar, there should be more on the rim of the well. I didn't know what material this well was made of, but it was so hard. Zhang Kanwen didn't say anything. However, he raised his hand and gestured at me. I quickly recognized that he was gesturing in the shape of a pen. I thought for a while and understood. I took out the yin-yang yama brush and handed it to him. After receiving the yama brush, Zhang Kanwen gestured at Han Wenan and me to move back a little. Then, he straightened his clothes and bowed to the north. Afterward, he stood up and put the yama brush in his hand into the well. After the tip of the brush was full, he placed it on the rim of the well and slowly wrote. I didn't move far away from the well. I craned my neck and saw that he had written one of Wen Tianxiang's poems on the rim of the well. This was the most famous line in Wen Tianxiang's poems. It was the first half of the last line of the poem Crossing the Ocean. Since ancient times, who hasn't died? After writing this line, Zhang Kanwen stopped. He turned around and returned the yin-yang yama brush to me. Then, he didn't hesitate anymore. He stooped and stirred the water in the well. As he stirred the water, a flow of Tao energy diffused from his body. Han Wan-an, and I immediately understood that he was summoning the well ghost. His method was the same as what Han Wan-an and I had used to use the Tao energy bullets. The effect was just as good. After he had stirred the water around a dozen times, I suddenly felt a chill around me. I lifted my head and saw the shadow I'd seen before. It was now above the round well. The last 2 times I'd seen the shadow, I had been high up in the sky, so I couldn't see it clearly. This time we were face to face. We were only 3 or 4 meters away from each other. I could finally see the appearance of this ancient, decaying, evil spirit. Perhaps it wasn't appropriate to describe him as a ghost. I could see his skin and flesh. However, his skin and flesh were like those of a mummy. They had dried and blackened, and most of them had fallen off. Only a small number of blackened muscle fibers could be seen on his chest. They were intermittently connected to each other. Except for his chest, the rest of his body was shrouded in a black mist. His head was exactly the same as the last time I'd seen him. The top of his skull was gone, and the top of his head was sunken. On his shriveled cheeks, 2 thick, black, shriveled muscles dangled from each side. The rest of his body was no different from a skeleton. In his big mouth, 2 neat rows of white teeth shone. They formed a strong contrast with the blackness of the rest of his body. On each of his teeth, there were inscriptions that looked like the oracle bone script. Those inscriptions were also white, but strangely, they were clear. At first glance, people couldn't help but sink into them. Besides that, the strangest thing about this ancient, evil spirit was his pair of eyes. Logically speaking, with his skull and brain completely gone, the uppermost part of his face should be the lower eye sockets and the bridge of his nose. In fact, that was indeed the case, but at the uppermost part of his head, there were 2 eyes floating in midair. To be more precise, they were 2 eyeballs. These 2 eyeballs weren't different from ordinary people. The pupils were in the middle of the white of the eyes. The center of the eyeball was dark, and the surroundings were slightly brown. They were floating in the air. Although they weren't connected to any muscle fibers, they could still move around. When he first appeared, he lowered his eyes and looked at Zhang Kenwan and the poem on the edge of the well. Soon, his pupils moved to the right and fixed on me. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.